but I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race.
It's a flying object, and we don't know what it is. I would hope somebody is checking it out.
It was a rocket or whatever, but incredibly fast, opposite direction. It was too fast to be an airplane.
I'm glad the Pentagon is looking at this, because if it poses a threat, I want them on top of it.
Well, the craft generates its own gravitational field.
You said there's lights in the sky?
The internet has become the command center for criminals and terrorists.
911, what's your emergency? I need help, please help me!
Aliens won't let it happen. You know, that's what we're instructed to say.
Roswell, Area 51. Alien kept deep under the ground.
1, 0,
self-serving. You're here for a reason. You're listening to Troubled Minds Radio.
Broadcasting live from a secret bunker just off the extraterrestrial highway. Somewhere in the desert sands outside of Las Vegas. From somewhere in space-time, loosely labeled Generation X on planet Earth. And asking questions of you in earnest into the digital darkness.
Good evening and welcome to Troubled Minds Radio. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and hello to all of you who may also have troubled minds. What's going on, guys? It's Tuesday night, which is one of the nights we get together and talk about all the things we're not allowed to talk about. We do that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific. What are those things, you may wonder? Well, it's too much. I'm going to have to sum up. Aliens, conspiracy, the paranormal, the government, academia, the 24-hour news cycle, propaganda, and the general feeling that we live in the upside down. As usual, we're doing this live. If you want to be part of the show tonight, the number to call is 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. We'll put you on the show. It's as easy as that. And, let's see, what else do we got? You can also join the Discord at troubledminds.org. Not only is the phone number at the website, the Discord link is there. Discord, of course, is a chat client. It's a voice client. It's completely free, and it works like an old school chat room. It also works like a what would you say, like a voice chat. You can share ideas, you can share links and photographs and videos and all kinds of stuff. It's a pretty nice, persistent little spot to just come hang out and meet people. And there you go. So join the Discord. I am watching the chat there as well as all the other places there. That's troubledminds.org. Click the Discord link and come say hi. We're also streaming on Rockfin, YouTube, DLive, and Twitter, of course. And actually, I think I turned off DLive. We'll get back to DLive. There's some sort of hack going on yesterday, so I'll verify that's okay before I turn that back on. But in any case, so we Rockfin, YouTube, and Twitter, and of course we're broadcasting live on the Fringe FM. And please download the Fringe app. You can find that at your app store. That's going to be, of course, Apple or Android. It's completely free. It's the easiest way to listen to Troubled Minds. And just smash the play button on the Fringe app at 7 p.m. precisely at Monday through Thursday, and you'll get me, you'll get us, you'll get Troubled Minds, and you'll get hopefully a pretty good conversation, because that's what we like to do around here. So what else do we got? Please also join the Fringe Discord, fringe.fm/chat. I am watching that chat as well as all the others and trying to keep up with your thoughts and incorporate them into the ideas tonight as we go, because of course, right, there's only one of me and I can only have so many good ideas. Most of the good ideas actually come from you guys, and so that's what this is all about. Open source, sort of open source show building is what this really is, and talking to you and considering all the things. All right, so I think that sums it up. That gets us to the place where we need to be. Let's begin, shall we? And let's start here. Now, this is actually an interesting thing, and it got me kind of going in a bunch of different ways, because this is one of those ones that we've talked about controlling the weather before in the past and things like that, but it's not really what I'm going to talk about tonight. But this article here is about the weather, and you'll see where we're going to get. It's kind of the long way around, but sometimes you got to take it the long way around so you can maybe have some insight into my wild thought process, or see if it makes any damn sense. How about that? So this is from MSN.com, and this is interesting because it says scientists say they can control the weather using chaos theory, right? So let's forget the weather part for a minute, and we'll think about chaos theory tonight. And not just chaos theory. As I was looking into this, I thought, yeah, this is a pretty interesting thing. We'll get to the article in just a sec, but I started thinking in terms of what's known as chaos magic. Have you guys ever heard of this? Yeah, well, and apparently chaos theory, chaos magic, and, well, the tulpa. It all seems to be related somehow. And maybe it isn't, and I'm just making it that way. We'll see. But here we go, straight from the article. Computer simulations suggest that it could be possible to artificially influence the weather by inserting butterfly effect perturbations. Yes, there's a good word. Researchers from the Riken Center for Computational Science in Japan say the mathematical investigation opens the path to research into the controllability of weather and could lead to weather control technology. Like I said, weather control, a little bit more boring. We've talked about that before. This is not boring, however. The butterfly effect, first theorized by mathematician and meteorologist Edward Lorenz in the 1960s, is a phenomenon whereby an infinitesimal perturbation, like a butterfly flapping its wings, can have huge consequences, like a tornado in Texas. It forms part of chaos theory, which posits that seemingly random activity and events can be deterministically, there you go, I said it, attributed to specific causes. A study detailing the research revealed what perturbations were needed to modify and control the weather. Quote, the control of weather is humans' longtime desire. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Not interested in the weather part of this. What I am interested in is the chaos theory and this, well, the thing known as the butterfly effect. And the notable part about it is, let's read a little bit about what this is. So the butterfly effect grants the power to cause a hurricane in China to a butterfly flapping its wings in New Mexico. Something to this effect, right? It may take a very long time, but the connection is real. If the butterfly had not flapped its wings at just the right point in space and time, the hurricane would not have happened. A more rigorous way to express that is that small changes in the initial conditions led to drastic changes in the results. Our lives are an ongoing demonstration of this principle. Who knows what long-term effects of teaching millions of kids about chaos and fractals will be. All right, so that gets us going here and kind of maybe lays the framework for the rest of this, that butterfly effect, right? And if you can have a butterfly flapping its wings somewhere in the world and cause, so let's say, a hurricane or tornado somewhere else, that tiny little change, almost an imperceptible change in the moving parts of the world that we can't even really quantify, well, it got me thinking in terms of other things, including back to that chaos magic. And if you guys have ever heard of this, there's something known as a tulpa. And a tulpa is a thought form, okay? Now, that's what we're talking about tonight. And some people have called them imaginary friends. Some people have called them all manner of things, actually. Because, of course, a thought form is whatever you want it to be. And that's the really, really weird part about this. So as we get started tonight, we're just going to go straight from chaos theory to, of course, chaos magic. And ask the question, right? This is the question for tonight as we begin. Do you think it's possible to create a tulpa or a thought form just from your brain, just from concentrating or focusing or some sort of ritual magic or something like this? Do you think this is possible? And if it is, well, what happens when a tulpa goes rogue? That's what I want to know. And I got some ideas of maybe how that will look tonight. But I have no idea because, of course, I'm not the answers guy. I'm the questions guy. And I want to hear from you. Now, the first question is exactly that. Is a tulpa real? Is it possible to create a thought form entity straight from your brain and have it be not you, have it be something else but within you and without you at the same time? So that's a pretty wild idea there. And this butterfly effect, sort of I like to think this in terms of, let's go, like I said, going a little bit of the long way around here, but I think that if you're talking about the butterfly effect and you have this chaos theory wherein just a little flapping of a butterfly can change the weather somewhere else in the world in major ways, it got me thinking about that idea of a tulpa and the thought form. And if you can somehow create one of these things, is there such a thing as a paranormal butterfly effect? All right, meaning that if you have a thought form and you create this thing, whatever it is, this imaginary friend, or right, like I said, people have called it that. In those terms, you create this thing, and is there some sort of actual chaos theory butterfly effect wherein the thought form starts changing? Let's say other things in other parts of the world, maybe on a paranormal level or any other level for that matter, I guess. It's pretty crazy, right? So there we go. And what about the idea of imaginary friends? Do you think that imaginary friends, let's say of themselves, are real? Or do you think they're sort of a figment of just a child's imagination? That's where we begin tonight. Is this stuff real? Is this just a bunch of BS? Is it somewhere in between? As you know, I don't really have answers here. I wish I did, because a lot of these questions are pretty fascinating to me, but I do not have easy answers, because I think easy answers, one, again, are probably dangerous, and then it's probably better to ask some good questions instead, right? So that's what we're going to do tonight. That's what's on my mind, and I hope you guys are doing well, and happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday out there to Troubled Minds Nation, and we're just kicking it, doing our thing, talking about crazy stuff, because, of course, if we don't, who's going to? So, okay, back to this real quick. So back to chaos theory, just so you can see, let's expound a little bit on what I'm talking about and what this means sort of to the overall let's say globe. All right. Well, sorry, flat earthers. That's not what I meant. It's really kind of what I meant. But anyway, chaos is the science of surprises, of the nonlinear and the unpredictable. This is from fractalfoundation.org. It teaches us to expect the unexpected. While most traditional science deals with supposedly predictable phenomenon like gravity, electricity, or chemical reactions, chaos theory deals with nonlinear things that are effectively impossible to predict or control, like turbulence, weather, the stock market, our brain states, and so on. These phenomena are often described by fractal mathematics, which captures the infinite complexity of nature. Many natural objects exhibit fractal properties, including landscapes, clouds, trees, organs, rivers, etc., and many of these systems in which we live exhibit complex, chaotic behavior. Recognizing the chaotic fractal nature of our world can give us new insight, power, and wisdom. For example, by understanding the complex, chaotic dynamics of the atmosphere, a balloon pilot can steer a balloon to a desired location. By understanding that our ecosystems, our social systems, and our economic systems are interconnected, we can hope to avoid actions which may end up being detrimental to our long-term well-being. Okay, right? And there we go. That's chaos theory. And I love it because, of course, it sort of encapsulates a lot of the things we talk about on this show. Because I think life, I think the world, I think the universe around us is largely unpredictable, because again, we don't know what we don't know. There are things that happen that we can't quantify, because in the case of the butterfly effect, right, you can't actually just measure all the butterflies in the world, right? And if you're talking about the flapping of a butterfly somewhere in North America is going to cause a hurricane somewhere in China or something, it's literally impossible to quantify those tiny perturbations, they're called, in the atmosphere, in the weather effects, okay? Because there's just too many. There's just too damn many to really, even to simulate by putting into a computer, all right? So that's the first part here. That's the weird thing. But again, apply that to a supernatural sort of situation with this idea of the tulpa. And that's where I'm going tonight. So, again, the first question, like I said, is, do you think this stuff's real? Do you think a tulpa is actually real? What happens if they detach from you and, let's say, they go rogue? What happens if, in this idea of chaos theory and the butterfly effect, what if a rogue tulpa actually causes a tiny perturbation in, well, let's say the paranormal world? Do you think something happens? Do you think something changes? Do you think there's a spiritual tsunami elsewhere because of this thing escaped? Who knows, right? And I think that's part of this. Let's there we go. That's what's going on. So back to the butterfly effect. This is pretty good stuff. Like I said, let's see. More principles of chaos. The butterfly effect is one. Unpredictability. I like this. Because we can never know all the initial conditions of a complex system in sufficient detail, we cannot hope to predict the ultimate fate of a complex system. Even slight errors in measuring the state of a system will be amplified dramatically, rendering any prediction useless. Since it is impossible to measure the effects of all the butterflies in the world, accurate long-range weather prediction will always remain impossible. All right? And order and disorder chaos is not simply disorder. Chaos explores the transitions between order and disorder, which often occur in surprising ways. We got mixing here. Again, this is our principles of chaos. Turbulence ensures that two adjacent points in a complex system will eventually end up in very different positions after some time has elapsed. Examples: two neighboring water molecules may end up in different parts of the ocean, or even in different oceans. A group of helium balloons that launch together will eventually land in drastically different places. Mixing is thorough because turbulence occurs at all scales. It is also nonlinear. Fluids cannot be unmixed. Yeah, there you go. Spiritual tsunami. That's a t-shirt, right? What's up, Moon Monk? I see that in the chat. How are you? Feedback. Here's two more of these principles of chaos, which, again, I think is pretty fantastic. I love this chaos theory stuff. So feedback. Systems often become chaotic when there is feedback present. A good example is the behavior of the stock market. As the value of a stock rises or falls, people are inclined to buy or sell that stock. This in turn further affects the price of the stock, causing it to rise or fall chaotically. And then fractals, of course. Gotta love the fractals. What's going on, guys? A fractal is a never-ending pattern. Fractals are infinitely complex patterns that are self-similar across different scales. They are created by repeating a simple process over and over in an ongoing feedback loop. Driven by recursion, fractals are images of dynamic systems, the pictures of chaos. Geometrically, they exist in between our familiar dimensions. Fractal patterns are extremely familiar since nature is full of fractals. For instance, trees, rivers, coastlines, mountains, clouds, seashells, hurricanes, etc. And that's from fractalfoundation.org, and that's in the nutshell chaos theory. Now, of course, back to the butterfly effect and the tiny perturbations, right, of what this actually means. And if you're talking about a butterfly creating some sort of tsunami or tornado or something elsewhere, then I think that, maybe the idea of this thought form might also do the same thing, except in sort of a paranormal sort of realm, right? So there we go. I don't know. I think that's where my mind's at tonight, because why not? I don't ask that question. I do ask that question because, I don't think it's, as far as I'm aware, never been asked before. So let's ask it. Let's ask it. Is it possible then, somehow, some way, if you create a tulpa? First thing we have to do is, of course, assume a tulpa is real. All right. So assume a tulpa is real, and you can create some sort of entity with your thoughts. All right. And the entity, again, we'll get to what a tulpa is and all the rest of that in just a moment here. But the idea is that this butterfly effect, it maybe has a paranormal sort of situation from the thought form created by yourself. All right. And I think that's the idea. That's where we're at. That's where I'm going, and hoping to hear your thoughts on that one more time. 702-957-1037. Now, what exactly is a tulpa? Let's find out. let's read about a tulpa. This is a great website called tulpa.info. Oh, yeah. Right? Here we go. A tulpa is an entity created in the mind, acting independently of and parallel to your own consciousness. They are able to think and have their own free will, emotions, and memories. In short, a tulpa is like a sentient person living in your head, separate from you. It's currently unproven whether or not tulpas are truly sentient, but in this community, they're talking about tulpa.info, we treat them as such. It takes time for a tulpa to develop a convincing and complex personality. As they grow older, your attention and their life experiences will shape them into a person with their own hopes, dreams, and beliefs. There you go. Now that's a tulpa, right? Have you ever heard of the idea of a thought form of a tulpa? And what about an imaginary friend? Do you think this is healthy for young children? And we'll get into all this. Got lots of questions tonight. And how does this go? What happens with this? And have you ever created a tulpa yourself? I'd like to know. And I think this is a weird one for me because I don't know it's not a bit like purposely splitting your consciousness. What's up, Cal says in the chat. I think so. I think that it's tough for me because I don't know that you can create entities with your thoughts. I don't know. What's up? Matt says, I wonder if trauma has anything to do with this. Who knows? That's a good question. And many children, as we know, do sort of develop and adopt imaginary friends. And so the question I had, which actually got me thinking in terms of this idea of the spiritual tsunami on the other side of the globe, because maybe a thought form got created, right? That whole butterfly effect, that chaos theory stuff. Again, merging some chaos theory and some chaos magic, because why not, right? But if you do that, all right, and you create this imaginary friend, let's say, all right, just like many children do. And, well, let's say this thought form escapes. Because, of course, right, many of these imaginary friends that are created by children, the child grows up, right? They grow up, and then what happens? The thought form just vanishes because they're no longer needed. Do they escape? Where do they go? And that's kind of what got the idea here to kind of pin a couple ideas, a couple different concepts anyway into one idea. And it makes me wonder if you do create these thought forms and they are sentient, and then these children that have imaginary friends, they've created these tulpas, they grow up and the tulpa is no longer necessary or needed. Do they stay with you, or do they escape and become something else? And then, of course, we've got that whole butterfly effect and chaos theory. And if they do escape and go somewhere else or become something else, we'll get into the egregores as well tonight and all kinds of different stuff. But if they do escape, if that tulpa escapes from the imaginary friend cycle of children, where do they go? And the second part of that is, do they somehow, some way, in that chaos theory, butterfly effect, create a spiritual tsunami somewhere else on Earth? And why not, right? Why not? If we're not asking those questions, nobody's asking those questions. So there we go. All my sources are down below. You can check some of this stuff out. But we're talking about chaos theory tonight, and chaos magic, and of course, tulpas and imaginary friends. So the questions for you, my friends, is this. Do you think a tulpa is real? Do you think it's possible to create a thought form simply with our minds? And what happens to that thought form in the term of an imaginary friend when the child grows up? And does the thought form follow? Does the thought form maybe recede into the subconscious? Does the thought form or imaginary friend straight up escape? Love to hear your thoughts on this. I don't have answers. I wish I did. Answers are easy, but I have lots of questions, and I'll just keep asking questions. But I'd love to hear what you think about this. Have you ever created a thought form? Do you think you have a thought form maybe attached to you now? And well, what else do we make of this? I think that's the equation here tonight. And of course, don't forget the chaos theory, and that if we have a rogue thought form, an imaginary friend that escapes, that goes somewhere else or does something they should not do you think it's possible for a paranormal butterfly effect to create a spiritual tsunami somewhere else in the world. I don't even know what that means. Hopefully you can help me make sense of it. 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. This is Troubled Minds. I'm Michael Strange. Don't go anywhere. More rogue thought forms, tulpas, imaginary friends, and chaos theory when we return. Be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and we are streaming on Rockfin, YouTube, Twitter, and of course, we're broadcasting live on the Fringe FM. Tonight, we're taking your phone call as we discuss the idea of a tulpa, a thought form, an imaginary friend. Where do these tulpas go when children outgrow them? And if they escape, can they cause, well, chaos theory? Love to hear your thoughts on this. 702-957-1037. And if you don't know what I mean, let's get to the phone calls and let's find out. Welcome to Troubled Minds. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
My name is David.
David, welcome to the show.
Arizona.
Arizona?
Sorry, I was eating pizza while I was waiting.
That's okay. You're totally good. David in Arizona, go right ahead. What are your thoughts on tulpas? Do you think this stuff is real?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with, like Eckhart Tolle, for example, but talks a lot about the pain body. I know mine literally feels like a separate entity that kind of rises up occasionally and does the things that, you know, bring me more pain in my life. I feel like it's just like an amalgamation of everything you've experienced that caused you pain in the past. But more what you're saying kind of like rang true for me, just like the ego in general. We kind of all are given like a straw man, like a name and pretty much everybody, no matter what country you live in, you're given like a name at birth and an identity that you have to, you know, identify as. So essentially we all like have that as our ego. And the butterfly effect thing you were talking about, I mean, if that's something that's even like possible, imagine the kind of energy that's generated by literally everybody on the planet having their ego, like the thing they identify as being like this imaginary strongman. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And sort of what I'm talking about in those terms, do you think that we're sort of causing something, maybe a larger idea of a tulpa, maybe a collective tulpa or an egregore, which we'll get to a little bit later tonight, something like that? Do you think maybe all of those egos that you're describing in the zeitgeist are maybe causing problems, and that's maybe part of the problems we have for humanity? Or do you think this is something else entirely?
I mean, that's kind of what rings with and resonates with truth for me. You know, if there's any sort of entity or, you know, entities behind the scenes that are manipulating everything, what better way than like assigning us an imaginary tulpa at birth and then literally having all of us have one? You know, I feel like if that's the case, then a good way to stop creating that energy and feeding those entities doing it, you know, would basically be to stop identifying with our egos and, you know, realize that we're connected to a much higher source and not the imaginary, you know, ego or tulpa that we've been assigned at birth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. I love the thought there. This is pretty good stuff to me. I haven't really thought too much about tulpas in my life until tonight, and once I started really thinking about it, it's a little creepy. It's a little creepy. And I like how you're describing it as our ego. And that could very well be because our ego is sort of let's say the one of the worst parts of ourselves, right? In many cases. So I don't know. So we're saying that tulpas in many ways are maybe a negative entity, or do you think that they could be positive as well?
You know, I guess there's like negative and positive is probably just like a human perspective of looking at things. They're an entity that probably generates some sort of energy or like some sort of force, and not necessarily that it's negative or positive, but just by identifying with something other than, you know, your what you truly are, you're kind of giving power to this thought form. So yeah, I mean, I honestly think on a mass scale, that kind of is just the first thing that came to mind when I tuned into this. I was just like, you know, I just found this randomly, and yeah, I don't really know much about tulpas or anything, but I have been looking into the ego a lot, and this just kind of like clicked in my mind. It was like, wow, everybody kind of has like an imaginary version of themselves. It's like a mind-made, self-formed sense of identity based off of like, you know, your name, your skin color, your age, your gender, where you're from, and all your accomplishments and stuff. And in reality, those are all just, you know, essentially imaginary, made out of like ideas formed from the physical world. So yeah, I mean, just scrolling through, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That really like resonated with me. Does that make sense?
Right on. I appreciate the call. Where did you find the show? Was that on YouTube or somewhere else?
On Reddit, actually. I was just scrolling through the conspiracy subs. I'm in the chat down there too, as channel 423, and my name's David. So yeah, no, I'll definitely subscribe and everything. It certainly feels like something you're talking about, something that's like on the right path. I think if there is such a thing as like an imaginary thought form, it would be good for us to kind of, you know, decouple ourselves from that and you know, understand and know more of like what we truly are and like the source, you know, if that makes sense.
100%. Great stuff. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for joining us. You're welcome back anytime. We do this Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Thanks for the phone call, David.
Right on. Thanks, man. Have a nice night.
You too. Thank you. Great thoughts there. And that's why we do this in this format, right? Because we start to talk about and think about things that I hadn't thought about yet. And that's a good thing. That was a fantastic call. And some great ideas. Again, is the, let's see, the tulpa, the thought form, is it sort of the ego and this sense of an imaginary sense of ourselves? So in some cases, thought forms, well, they do exist, don't they? Because we have this, there's the physical self, but then there's the idea of the physical self. And just in those, in the same, let's say, entity, you've got two different versions of the exact same thing, but they're very, very different. It just depends. It's like the thing and the perception of the thing. What are your thoughts on this? We're talking about rogue thought forms, imaginary friends, and now, of course, we can add ego to the mix because of the great call there from David. Looking to hear your thoughts. 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. We'll put you on the show as easy as this. Let's go to Jennifer in Missouri. Welcome to Troubled Minds. How are you tonight?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. I think this one seems like it might be right down your alley, maybe. What do you think about thought forms and tulpas?
Yeah, I'm really into this. I mean, I've thought a lot about this before. I'm sure you've thought, now that you've looked into it, I'm sure you've probably thought of pretty much everything with it, because it's, you know, it's pretty surface in a lot of ways, but there is so much to it, like you're saying. Like, I think that thought forms come from your imagination, that they are created from emotion and imagination combined, and that they're made either intentionally and unintentionally, that they can be so strong that they interact with the physical realm, almost like a ghost, that they can be like friends or they can be parasitic, that they are akin to like fetches, and that's heard about very much in magic. There's fifth faths and fetches. These are things people, like sorcerers, will intentionally create. They'll be doing it on purpose. And to be rid of a thought form, I've heard you have to reabsorb it. You have to reabsorb the thought form. That can be very difficult if it's highly evolved. Like if the thought form has had energy for a long time, they need to continue to be fed unless you can reabsorb them. And that's kind of what happens with like a vampiric situation. Like if you won't feed it, they'll go off and they'll go feed on others. And this is reported with like vampires and stuff. And I think many spirits, ghosts, and gods are actually thought forms. I think that faith ties into thought form creation. And faith in a very serious way, as in like prayer on a daily basis or meditation on a daily basis, focus in general, like where you literally sit down and just particularly focus on the thought form and the creation of it. I think that we are thought forms, like of the creator that made us from nothing. It's kind of like that. Like you can create a thought form in multiple ways, a tulpas. You can create it in multiple ways. You can do it by adding, like, the more ritual you add in, for example, doing physical things, burying things, building things, you can even more create the thought form, give it more energy. Or, like, for example, if I say something and then I respond to myself and I continue to indulge myself that way, and I even get others to indulge in it as well, that's very powerful for creating that kind of behavior to create a thought form. That's even better. And I think that it's important to mention that a thought form can become much more than just an imaginary thing, just an idea, because an idea is very powerful in itself. But the thought form surpasses that. It goes beyond that, and it becomes much more powerful than that, I think. And it's more than an imaginary thing. It becomes like a real thing. In the case of the spirits mentioned in the Bible, in one instance where they're in the tents, in the tabernacle, they have to light the candles in the tent, and everyone was afraid when the presence came into the tent, almost like a spirit. It was darkened, and they felt the fear. The fear was because they were in the presence of a thought form, which feels very much like what people feel when they feel a ghost or they see a real one. And when you see a real spirit or a real thought form, a real being, it's terrifying for a lot of people. And I thought that's what they felt in that tent. And it's the same with all magicians. They all have to light the candles because a lot of times these thought forms or these beings, will darken a room because they're made of nothing in a way. And even if animals, are sacrificed to these thought forms. Anyway, the other thing too is that I was thinking is, how do I know that a thought form that comes from the imagination, that's a very strange thing. I mean, like the idea of the imagination and thought forms coming from there, the being could have wanted to be imagined, to be realized and brought into existence. Perhaps if I even create like a statue of the thought form and begin to sacrifice to the statue, as people have done in the past. If I begin to speak on behalf of the statue as an oracle, for example, and others who are buying into it as well or believe in it. It's not buying into it. It's nothing fake about it. In my opinion, I think it's something that becomes very real. It's very powerful. For example, God created the angels in the instance of that mythos, in that legend. And these were persons with choice. That's often misunderstood, but in the Catholic mythos anyway, the angels were persons that had choices and wills of their own, but no bodies. And they were given choice, and some chose to, for example, love God, which is what he created them for, and to be faithful, and others chose to not be faithful. And you had an instance where these thought forms of God wouldn't leave heaven, wherever that is, if that's somewhere in something like the imagination of God. They wouldn't leave on their own. There was actually a battle, and God had created St. Michael, for example, another thought form, a thing that he created from nothing, that fought that battle and was able to overcome them and cast them out. Where they went, it makes you wonder about the rogue tautos, the rogue thought forms. And then the idea that last thing is this is very malleable. This is not much different from ourselves, that we are thought forms, that we create and imagine ourselves, as you mentioned already with the ego thing, that we are the ones who decide what we will be, who we will be. And the more detail we add to that, as far as, however people go about it, there are many different techniques. They truly do design themselves. And that's no different than this idea, I think. And that's all I wanted to say about it. And I think that I love this topic. It's like one of the best topics, I think, and one of the most understated topics ever.
Thank you. I appreciate the phone call. So can I ask you real quick before you go then, what happens? So you said you have to reabsorb them to get rid of them. Can they escape? Can the thought form that you have as sort of a tether or a control over, can they get away? And what happens when they do? Any thought on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The issue is that the person who's accidentally, like intentionally or even unintentionally, usually unintentionally, but even people who have intentionally created thought forms, I think that depending on the type of, like, how much dimension you've given to this thought form, how much you've invested into it, how much dimension it has in personality and character and traits, some you may have even forgotten that you created, that if you're not giving it what it's needing, if it's not accomplishing what it needs to accomplish from you, it could start to spread to those that are near to you. This is this is the vampire, this is the parasite, this is the demons people are afraid of. It gets away from its master and whoever had created it, in some cases, for example, even God. And it has its own personality, and it's a being that has its own choices and its own will. And if you've given it that dimension where it has its own will and it realizes it, there's nothing you can do except for if you can't reabsorb it by literally being possessed by it and processing it that way and letting it just kind of absorb back into yourself, which is very dangerous from what I understand, then yeah, it gets away from you and it goes about most likely just in your very near vicinity. But the more people who start to see it or feel it or think it or imagine it, sense it in their imagination, and then start to bring it more into reality, it spreads. And that person goes somewhere else and they might still be thinking about it, and it spreads. It travels through the realm of the imagination inside of every person, almost like a pipeline.
Okay, so
I think that's kind of how that might work.
And they can become they can gain power through this acknowledgement of people and things and places, and just become sort of out of control, right? Like I said, maybe demons and things like this. I love the thoughts. Amazing stuff. I hate to twist your arm to get more out of you. If you got anything else, go right ahead.
Well, I think in the past, it was taken extremely seriously. Like I said, if I was very serious, I never would do this, but if I was very serious, and you imagine if I set, this sounds completely crazy, but people were doing it all the time. You have to realize that, like, in the ancient world, people were doing this all the time. All of the gods, all of the statues were the thought forms of all the desired traits of humanity. And they would create these statues, and then they would literally take physical things and they would sacrifice it to the thought forms that they believed were living in these statues. Imagine that. And then once it stops, you have many cases today of certain places where the spirits are likely still wanting that kind of sacrifice, or they are still wanting to be fed. And the idea of dying gods, and that they still must eat. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. That's what's funny about this, in my opinion, is that this is not always a bad thing. This is sometimes a very good thing, a very important thing that could be dying right now. There may be something that we should be feeding, a thought form we should be realizing in ourselves and in the world in general. That there are others who believe in this and have practiced it for centuries, if not longer, and they haven't stopped. And it's important that we also don't we shouldn't turn our backs on it, because that realm exists, this realm of the mind. I mean, I'm using it right now, and so are you. and that's how we're talking to each other. And this kind of stuff creates real things, and that's where these things live. And so it's important that you do have some understanding of it to a point, because others very much do and have throughout all of humanity and history. So we shouldn't stop now. But also, too, you shouldn't just go about creating random new thought forms. And you shouldn't just be feeding, be careful what you're thinking about. And because people do this, most of the time this happens by accident. In fact, a lot of the draining people feel of like a vampire, that it's themselves. They've done it to themselves. It's not someone near them. They've created their own vampire that's feeding off of them. So that's something that people, I think it's very important. They might consider it and look into it. If anyone's experiencing that who's listening to this, that you may have accidentally done it yourself.
Gotcha. Okay. So
it's not always somebody else.
Right, not to be trifled with. Amazing, great stuff as always, Jennifer. I appreciate the phone call. Jennifer here has a YouTube channel. Check it out. Links down in the description. As you can tell, amazing stuff from her. And Little Birdie told me she's got new videos coming very soon. Always a pleasure, Jennifer. Thank you for the phone call. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great night. Okay.
I love your show, Mike. Have a good night.
Thank you. Appreciate it. There you go. You want to be part of the program, part of the show tonight, part of this discussion, rogue thought forms, imaginary friends, 702-957-1037. What are your thoughts here? Had some pretty great ideas from David and from Jennifer as we get going tonight. What about the ego? What about the idea of the ego as the thought form? What happens when a thought form escapes? What is this thing about giving energy to these, let's say rogue thought forms, these rogue tulpas, and then becoming maybe so, let's say, burdened with negative or positive energy that they actually become godlike? You tell me, what are your thoughts on this? Is this good? Is this not good? Is it somewhere in between? Is it like Jennifer said that there are positive tulpas, and where we put our energy is an important aspect? And so, well, here we are by dark of night, telling ghost stories in the digital darkness. And there you go. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We're talking about, again, we can toss in some chaos theory, talking about spiritual tsunamis, talking about the butterfly effect, talking about tulpas, thought forms, and what happens when they go rogue. And there we go. What's up, Tim in the chat says, imagination. The imagination is a real place. And indeed. What's happening, guys? I hope everybody's doing well tonight. So far, so good. See you out there, Danny, in the chat. How are you? We're just talking about imaginary friends. And so do you think it's healthy in some cases for children to have these imaginary friends, right? Some think that it's just sort of a coping mechanism for maybe a stress, something like that for kids, a coping mechanism for that stress sort of reaction to just the world that they're learning about? Or do you think that there's maybe these imaginary friends are something else entirely, and that's the nutty part here? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We're talking about all this and more tonight, and love to include you. So as we get going, we got a break here coming up, and we'll do that in just a second. But that's the question tonight. What is a tulpa? The thought form. Do you think it's actually real? Do you think it could be real? And if it is or it isn't, I'm open to that discussion, of course, and that idea, because I don't have the answers. I just have questions. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. The tulpa, the thought form. What happens when it goes rogue and actually escapes? Lots of ideas floating around in my head. I hope there are also lots of ideas floating around in yours. That's what this is about. It's about getting together, sharing ideas, and wondering about the mysteries of the universe. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being part of this. 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. We got the Night Stalker coming up at the top of the hour, which is just a couple minutes from now. And don't go anywhere. More Troubled Minds on the way. This is Troubled Minds. I'm Michael Strange. More rogue thought forms, imaginary friends, the Night Stalker, and your calls when we return. Be right back. we are talking about the alien abduction phenomenon. Aliens.
The aliens are looking through your eyes and they're accessing your optic nerve. I'm doing that. And through that optic nerve, they're transferring to your brain. People are random images as they traverse neurons in the brain.
Alright, so maybe
and they also feel them planting or receiving memories or ideas or images.
Broadcasting live from a secret bunker just off the extraterrestrial highway. Somewhere in the desert sands outside of Las Vegas. From somewhere in space-time, loosely labeled Generation X on planet Earth. And asking questions of you in earnest into the digital darkness.
good evening and welcome to Troubled Minds Radio. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and hello to all of you who may also have troubled minds. What's going on, guys? It's Tuesday night, which is one of the nights we get together and talk about all the things we're not allowed to talk about. That would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific. What are the things we're not allowed to talk about? Aliens, conspiracy, the paranormal, the government, academia, the 24-hour news cycle, propaganda, and the general feeling that we live in the upside down. Of course, we are doing this live. We're streaming on Rockfin, YouTube, and Twitter tonight. Also, we're broadcasting live on the Fringe FM, and we're taking your phone calls. 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037, and we'll put you on the show. The topic tonight is a tulpa, a thought form, chaos theory, chaos magic. Do you think this idea of a thought form, a tulpa, us being able to create something simply with our mind, an entity with its own desires, its own, let's say, consciousness, are we able to do that? Do we have that power within us? And are these tulpas actually a real thing? That's what's on my mind tonight. Just a normal Troubled Minds Tuesday night, thinking about all kinds of crazy stuff, because that's what we do. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is this stuff real? And what happens when a tulpa escapes? And that's there you go. That's probably a mouthful, and let's call it a mindful. And I'd love to hear from you. And one more time, click the Discord link at troubledminds.org, and we'll put you on the show. As simple as this. Let's go to Derek in Massachusetts, the Night Stalker. Welcome to Troubled Minds. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Mike. Great show tonight.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. What do you know about tulpas?
Oh, man. I feel like I have too many ideas, so just cut me off whenever we run out of time, whenever this call is behind me and stuff.
Go right ahead.
A really cool idea. And Jennifer really got my mind racing and stuff. So first, as far as like the chaos theory idea and the idea of them trying to like change the weather based on chaos theory, that's like really fascinating to me. And that could be because during the little kind of paragraph you were talking about, like when you're trying to explain chaos theory, they said how our thoughts are a huge X factor in the chaos theory. That's like they can't predict our thoughts, so it's tough to predict the outcome of different elements in nature. So is that possibly something they're doing with the data collecting? Is it less about being invasive and spying on us and more about trying to predict the things that we're going to think? The idea of, are we getting ads directed to our thoughts because they're reading our minds, or because these algorithms are getting so ridiculous that they're able to just predict the things that we want? So they're just feeding us things that it thinks we want, and it seems so easy because it is the things that we want. It knows us really well, you know? But I more so want to talk about the tulpa idea. That's just I don't know how you got from there to there, but great idea, Mike. Great topic.
I don't know how I don't know how I did it either. It is chaos magic, though, right? So actually, the idea of summoning a tulpa is actually built into chaos magic. So I think chaos theory, chaos magic, the step is not too far, right? Because chaos theory is pretty wild. But yeah, go right ahead. What regarding the tulpas?
Yeah, I'm not a magician. I've never done magic before, so I don't know. I'm not a chaos magic expert and that kind of stuff, but I think you're right. And I think in Marvel, I'm just gonna hit a bunch of pop culture references and stuff, but in Marvel, they're introducing chaos an absolute ton in the current phase we're in right now. Like Moon Knight, the tagline is "Embrace the Chaos." WandaVision, she became the embodiment of chaos magic as the Scarlet Witch, and her power set, they really flushed out what she's capable of, and it seems like she's less previously, she was just kind of a weird person who had these weird powers, and she could kind of do whatever the Avengers needed her to do. But now they flushed it out, and now she is chaos magic in the Marvel universe. Basically, means reality warping powers. She has the ability to change the reality that everyone experiences because she's she's the embodiment of chaos magic. So that brings us to the Tulpa idea of changing reality. Is our mind, is our consciousness shaping reality? We've talked about this a bunch, and I think it is. I can't prove tulpas exist. I have no idea if tulpas exist. None of my imaginary friends are walking around beside me. But the idea of it is very provocative. And there's a lot of writers who talk about actually meeting their characters that they created. I think Grant Morrison, who's a chaos magician, talks about meeting a character that he actually wrote one of his comics, which is really, really trippy. And then Alan Moore, another magician, I think he's a more traditional magician, but he talks about the imagination realm and the importance of the imagination realm, and that kind of everything in the material world, everything in the physical world begins in the imagination realm. Then the example that he uses is the chair. The idea of the chair is around in our minds before anyone actually invents the chair. So the imagination realm is kind of the foundation realm for what ends up flourishing in the material plane. So they might be the most important thing. And that can just lead down a ton of different thought avenues, or a ton of different rabbit holes, as far as people trying to guide that mechanism, people trying to direct the flow of the reality creation that humans are capable of. But as far as where do imaginary friends go, there's a movie growing up, maybe 99 or 2000 on Disney Channel called Don't Look Under the Bed, where this girl is getting haunted by just monsters, boogeyman, and her imaginary friend helps her to battle it. And then spoiler alert for this old Disney movie, but it ends up in this mythology, imaginary friends, once their child stops believing in them, turn into a boogeyman. They turn into monsters and they start terrorizing the kid, which then it's a big cycle that kind of perpetuates itself, But that makes me think, kind of just another movie idea of this runaway tulpa. Imagine you need Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and Bigfoot and the Tooth Fairy and stuff to go stop some out of control imaginary friend, or some imaginary friend that gets ignored and it really snaps if they do have their own ego and thoughts and that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I'm rambling. As far as the chaos theory involved with a tulpa, it makes me think could the creation of something that really acts outside the norm kind of impact the trophic cascade of the shadow biome? There's that video that was out probably 7 years ago, kind of went viral, of the idea of the trophic cascade in the wilderness, and it used the example of introducing wolves to an environment, and that the introduction of those wolves trickles through every element of the biosphere and actually changes the flow of the rivers. So introducing wolves changes the way the rivers flow. So introducing some rogue tulpa with its own goals might actually disturb the natural balance that exists in the upside down. I'm rambling, so save me. But
no, perfect. Well said. That's sort of what I was trying to get at, and I'm not sure if I describe things as perfectly as they can be. But you just nailed it, my friend, because I think that's exactly what this is about, right? If in those terms, and I do like the idea, by the way, of the tulpa escaping and becoming the boogeyman, right? It's like your best friend, and then snap your fingers, you don't like it anymore, you don't need it anymore, and then suddenly it's jealous and it's coming to get you. That's pretty wild there. But then this maybe shadow biome, but instead of terms of like that, we've talked about that in terms of like an alien shadow biome. But what about the upside down, like the Demogorgon and then Stranger Things and whatnot? Maybe that's the shadow biome. And again, is there that sort of a ripple effect like you just described? I love it. You get a rogue thought form that has its own agenda and grows and grows and grows in power. I think it's hard to not say would be sort of affecting the larger whatever biome that happens to be of the upside down itself. Pretty wild stuff, man. You were spot on with this. It's almost like you've done this once or twice before.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the practice. Now I'm just a product of the environment. You know?
Right, right. But the rivers are changing.
Yeah, exactly. That's fine. Big shout out to rivers there. But as far as I think the movie *Malignant* is actually kind of based on an evil friend who kind of goes rogue and starts, evil imaginary friend that goes rogue and starts murdering people. I'm not a huge horror movie guy, so I actually haven't seen it. But I think it's when I was looking for it, it kind of seemed like there was a rising trend of evil imaginary friends movies that are kind of happening in the Conjuring universe and the *Malignant*, and I think a more recent *Exorcist* and that kind of stuff. And it takes like different forms. Like one of being they can't solve these murders, it ends up being the actual imaginary friend that murders people, and then the other just influences by the imaginary friend. If the imaginary friend or if these rogue tulpas have their own agendas, then they're whispering in the ears of these kids, getting them to do their bidding for them, you know? And somebody's going to mention it, but the idea of the Slender Man and those girls who actually murdered one of their friends based on what they said was influence from the Slender Man. So they murdered somebody in veneration or in honor of this creature that they claimed to have been interacting with, but was actually, we know, was invented on creepypasta. And there's all kinds of rumors that maybe he wasn't created on creepypasta, because there's different stories of people seeing something very, very similar going all the way back to the 1600s. And is that some type of thought form, some type of mind virus that keeps reshaping itself through the thoughts of human beings? So it's like, what if the phenomena, what if this is the phenomena? What if this tulpa creation mechanism is what's kind of driving the world that we're living in? And we talk about the double slit experiment, the importance of the observer, the importance of us as reality creators. We mentioned it in the Cthulhu episode or Lovecraft episode, or is something on the other side trying to create itself through the collective attention of masses, you know? So I bring it up a million times, but the idea of the phenomena acting based on the consciousness of the perceiver, that the flying saucer wasn't a flying saucer until people read in the newspaper flying saucer, and then the phenomena changed. But before that, it kind of like is shaped based on the culture of the time. So is that something reflecting the culture? Is it something influencing culture? Is it both? Is this just something from the other side? Is this process a way for things, like Jennifer said, to actually build themselves in the material world via the human mind, which is trippy, really trippy to me. What do you think?
I love it. And again, as always, drinking a shotgun and the maybe juice. Lots of angles here, lots of ways to look at this. And I don't know. I think that interestingly, this imaginary friend is a tulpa, and then maybe sort of a progression of like a sort of a childhood character, maybe turning into like a dark cloud in the upside down, right? It seems amazing in that they got to go somewhere, right? And how about this too? Did you ever have an imaginary friend? Do you remember, or maybe know anybody, a sibling or anything that did, a friend, anything like that?
I kinda no like person really, but I kind of lived. I'm just a daydreamer. Like my favorite thing to do is for my entire life has just been to daydream, and it's a product of maybe me trying to avoid things that are maybe happening in my actual life, but I just love to just kind of fantasize about stuff. So I went into the same world all the time when I did that. There was a worldwide superpowers. I was this person every time I entered that world. So if if this is real, then in some plane of reality that realm does exist somewhere. But I've never had any like actual paranormal experiences or anything weird with that. And it's like it just kind of I stopped doing it eventually. But yeah, I don't know. As far, like Matt mentioned the trauma idea, and it makes me think. I feel like this movie exists, but I just can't think of what it would be. Where somebody's imaginary friend is like their closest ally. It's really like they created the imaginary friend to deal with their trauma, but maybe something gets so intense that the imaginary friend, some type of trauma like Dark Phoenix and the X-Men, something just, or 11 in Stranger Things, where she really just kind of blows her top, but really the trauma gets too unbearable, and then rather than like create these magical powers where like fire shoots out of her body and stuff, it actually makes the imaginary friend snap and like try to protect the child at all costs. And then what if that kind of snowballs into like the Ultron scenario, where Ultron's like, okay, in order to fix the planet, I have to destroy everything because humans are going to kill themselves. So it's what if this imaginary friend in trying to protect their child, they're like, okay, there's dangerous things out there. There's things lurking in the shadows. I have to be proactive and take out everything in the shadows, lurking in the shadows. So then all of a sudden the shadows realize like, all right, we can't let this happen. It's this rogue monster is going to really throw off the entire cascade. It's really going to affect the rivers flowing in the upside down. Yeah, it's trippy. I feel like I'm rambling, but
no, you're good.
It's really trippy.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Rambling in the best way. Totally
Sorry.
good. Quick question for you, if you got a minute extra here.
Yeah.
S Magician 88 over on Fringe Discord says, "Is chaos energy a way of channeling ego-based creation?" At the Night Stalker is asking you the question.
Oh man, I'm not sure. That's somebody. I mean, that's a question maybe to ask the next show. Joe would know more than me about that. But I think the idea of chaos magic, in just basic bare bones, what is it? It's like magic. It's without the parameters of an established body of, like, it's just using the elements that work in magic rather than like following the practices, following the grimoires, following these books that require you to follow like all the letters to the T. It's just basically saying, okay, use the elements that work. Like, if you do this, it elicits an effect. If you do this, like sexual thing, it elicits an effect. This. Like, let's just skip all the work and just go right to the action. So I guess, I mean, under certain paradigms or under certain perceptions, there is an ego aspect to it. It is more just a make it happen right now thing. But I'm not sure. I mean, a chaos magician would be able to explain it better than me. I'm not sure. In Marvel, in particular, which is like, again, the biggest pop culture thing we have, they're explaining it as if it's magic that creates reality, magic that affects the material world that we're living in. It might be the way that they bring in the X-Men and all that kind of stuff. It's that her chaos magic is so powerful that it changes the entire multiverse that we're living in. But I mean, through having that idea in Marvel, and now millions and millions of people's first time hearing the term chaos magic, it's going to be in a warping reality type of way. So again, will that affect what chaos magic is? Will that affect, like, the ideas that get presented to us? I think do shape reality. They absolutely do. They, like, ideas, like Jennifer said, ideas do shape reality. So if that's the case, something has to be aware of that. Something, whether it's the elites guiding our hands, like I mentioned, we're out of time. I mentioned this before, but what if like nothing happens without, this is real maybe just talking, but what if like nothing happens without our consciousness like kind of making it happen? What if there's no active conspiracies really happening at once? Like what if our belief that there's a small elite group or a small group of elite that are controlling the planet or have all the power is creating that? So they throw out the ideas, they actually insert these conspiracy ideas, they insert the memes that there is a cabal of evil overlords that control the planet and have all the resources, because they know that belief will then in turn give them all the resources and give them all the power, and that's like human beings. So what if something on the other side was doing that? What if something on the other side knows that the way to manifest themselves, or just to get the things that they want done, because they don't have physical bodies, is via the human mind, the human consciousness. Yeah, so that's like things that aren't rogue. Those are things that like have plans and they're actively trying to work their plans through us. But then this thing you were saying is just a rogue imaginary friend that just goes wild. Can that affect everything? And I think that's all answers. In theory, yeah. But again, I have no actual experience with any of it. It's just cool, maybe just stuff.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, I'm talking fast. It's a really busy night, so I feel like I'm rambling bad right now.
You're okay. But, you're spot on, my friend. Just real quick before you go, this one's for you from Edgar Allan Poe. Those who dream by day are cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night. You're the best, my brother.
Well, thank you, brother. Great show.
Have a good night.
Great calls, everybody.
Thanks, you too. Night Stalker here has a YouTube channel. Check it out. It's just like it sounds. Night Stalker. He's working at a grocery store, actually stocking stuff and peeling out some time to give us an amazing phone calls. And so please give him he's got a YouTube channel. Links in the description below. Let's inspire him to make more than the trailer he's got there. And as you can tell, Derek's a very brilliant guy, and always looking to sip some maybe juice and talk about amazing things with us. So there you go. That's where we're at tonight. We're talking about tulpas, and I don't know. I think the thing that we have here is that I think the thought form is real, in the sense of, at least like Night Stalker there described, how we have a sense of our own reality. Right? There's reality and there's a perception of reality, and the perception of reality, of course, would be the tulpa of reality itself. You get the point and the meaning there, is that we don't really know what that objective reality is and what consciousness actually is, and how the two are even calibrated or not calibrated to maybe be in perfect harmony. And that's why, like they say, right, you can say, for instance, that in this case, talking about thought forms, they say that, positive people, optimistic people are typically just more successful than pessimistic people, because in some sense they are sort of manifesting that positivity into their universe, their personal universe, even though, of course, we all know that, objectively speaking, there's no such thing as a personal universe, is there? But maybe there is. Maybe you can influence these things by, again, like Robert says, the Robert over on Rockfin, that you demand things of the universe and you will get them. And so maybe that's exactly what this is. The thought forms are not necessarily even entities of such, but maybe somehow, some way, they're something else, and your maybe perception of reality is the tulpa. There's the objective reality, which we can't really even quantify because we're the observer effect, like Derek said. But what about the next step of that, and the reality itself that we live in is that giant tulpa? I don't know. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on imaginary friends, thought forms? What happens when a thought form gets away? I love the idea that Derek had about the from that movie, that when the children grow out of the imaginary friends, they outgrow them. The imaginary friend becomes the boogeyman. I love it. What happens when the imaginary friends escape and go rogue? That's what's on my mind tonight. Just some normal random musings from Troubled Minds, because if we're not doing it, who else is going to do it? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you heard of a tulpa? Have you heard of a thought form? Have you heard or ever had an imaginary friend? Heard of an imaginary friend, I mean. And of course, non-linear, open-ended. What are your thoughts? What happens when a imaginary friend escapes? A thought form, a tulpa? Are there, let's say, a ripple effect in the upside down? 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. This is Troubled Minds. I'm Michael Strange. Don't go anywhere. More tulpas, thought forms, your calls, and more when we return. Be right back. Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and we are streaming on Rockfin, YouTube, Twitter, and Rockfin, YouTube, Twitter. Usually D-Live. We're not streaming on D-Live tonight. We'll get that back up soon. And, of course, we're broadcasting live on the Fringe FM. We're taking your phone calls tonight as we discuss this idea of the tulpa, the thought form. What about your imaginary friend? If you had an imaginary friend, or let's say hypothetically you did when you were young, eventually it disappeared. Where exactly did this imaginary friend go? Did it go rogue? And are there consequences to rogue imaginary friends? 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. And just listen to reading chat, getting amazing phone calls from my friends here and talking about crazy stuff by night. That's what we do in Troubled Minds here. Amazing stuff so far. So the idea of these thought forms, of these tulpas, right, in and of themselves, is this a real thing? That's the question tonight. That's the base question. If you think the thought form of the tulpa is real or not real, is the question tonight. Is it real? Is it not? But then, of course, we know we've heard all kinds of stories about children having imaginary friends when they were young, okay? And so is the imaginary friend sort of a tulpa, exactly like this, like that idea of a thought form? And if the kids did have these things, they said, what happens? You outgrow it and it just disappears? I mean, if this was actually a thing and you created it in your brain, whatever the friend was, it has to go somewhere, right? Like Jennifer said, maybe you reabsorb these things, or what about if they do escape? And I think that's the question tonight. And lots to talk about here. Crazy stuff as always, but listen to this. This is from Psychology Today, and this is discussing imaginary friends. And this is exactly what let's say modern psychology describes this as. Here we go. A friend. Let's see. Here we go. Most young children play pretend games and interact with their stuffed animals, dolls, or other special toys as if they were alive. According to Marjorie Taylor and her colleagues at the University of Oregon, by age 7, about 37% of children take imaginative play a step farther and create an invisible friend. The variety of forms that invisible friends come in is a testament to the power of imagination. Tracy Gleason and her colleagues cite these examples from their research on invisible friends. Here we go. Star Friends and Heart Fan Club. They call this groups of preschool-aged human friends with whom the child had birthdays, went to the fair, and spoke a language called Hobachi? I don't know how to say that. But here we go. Another herd of cows. They say cows of many colors and varying sizes who were often fed or diapered like infants, discovered when the child's father accidentally stepped on one. There we go, the maybe juice, right? A human of varying gender whom the child routinely summoned by shouting out the front door of the family's house. There's a few examples of these invisible friends. As these descriptions show, invisible friends can be human, animal, or fantasy creatures. They may appear alone or in groups. In past research, boys have been observed inventing only male imaginary friends, whereas girls have either male or female ones. Interesting stuff here. Again, this is from Psychology Today, talking about this phenomenon of children having imaginary friends, and of course, thought forms, tulpas, right? That's what these things actually are. So it says children with invisible friends can readily describe what these friends look like and how they behave. Many children even offer details about hearing or touching their invisible friends. And invisible friends can sometimes be a part of the life of a child and a family for years. Taylor and her colleagues found that children who create a friend out of a personified object tend to have a parent-like relationship with their special toy friend, whereas children with invisible friends tend to imagine an egalitarian relationship more like a real friend. Like real friends, invisible friends don't always cooperate. Taylor and her colleagues found that about 1/3 of children with invisible friends complained that their invisible friend didn't always come when they called, didn't leave when asked, talked too loudly, didn't share, or did annoying things like put yogurt in my hair. That's an interesting one. How about that? The idea that you have a tulpa, an invisible friend that doesn't obey your wishes. I think that's about as rogue as you can get. Well, short of escaping and turning into the boogeyman or something under the bed. But pretty wild ideas here. And again, we're talking about this idea of imaginary friends, tulpas, the thought form. How does this play into, let's say, the zeitgeist? And how does this become something larger? Like, I don't know, let's say an egregore. You ever heard the term? We'll get to that a little bit later as we go. But that's the question tonight. Are these imaginary friends actually real? These thought forms, these tulpas as they're known, are we creating these entities? And if we are, what happens to them when children outgrow them? That's a hell of a question. Do they escape? Are they absorbed back in? Do they become jealous and start terrorizing? Whatever's going on with that, I don't know. Love to hear your thoughts. There's a lot to talk about here. We're started with chaos theory and got to chaos magic. And how do you summon these things? I think that's a little bit weird that there's people that actually say they summon these things. And there's this weird connection too. Have you guys heard this one about the Bronies? You guys heard about Bronies? This is wild, right? I had no idea. I've heard of this before. It's grown men that are super into My Little Pony, right? They call them Bronies, all right? And My Little Pony, of course, is an old toy, My Little Pony, right? And, these Bronies, apparently, oddly enough, are maybe creating these thought forms of their favorite My Little Ponies. And so like these two worlds have sort of collided, and then we have these Bronies, right, and grown men that are super into My Little Pony, and then they're somehow creating these thought forms of their favorite ponies. What in the world? I'm not even kidding you. Like this turned up when I was kind of digging into this, and I was like, what in the world is this? All right, we got servitors, we got chaos, we got all kinds of stuff. Let's get to the Bronies. Where's the Bronies? I think this is worth mentioning because it's like, WTF is going on here? This is from Pathos.com. And the headline here is Happy, Grant Morrison, Tulpas, and Bronies. And yeah. Can you believe that? That's the world is just an amazing, odd, crazy place. And the term tulpamancy, by the way, is the act of creating a tulpa, or that thought form. So give me just a sec. We'll get to tulpamancy and we'll get to the Bronies. But let's go to, it looks like Angela in Kentucky. Welcome to Troubled Minds, my friend. You're on with Mike. Go right ahead. How are you tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. This is really piquing my interest because I had a black shadow figure that followed me around for 10 years. My entire family saw it, and they never told me until decades later, of course, so I thought I was on my own with it the whole time. But the point is, my uncle's only 5 years older than me, so when I was 9, he was like 14 or 15. So the timing, if you're talking about someone's imaginary friend, when you're a little kid, and then in your teenagers, let's just say it develops into more of a poltergeist. And then as you get older, maybe it becomes an attachment, and it follows you through your life as these different things. And you may think it's completely unrelated from, age bracket to age bracket. But in this case, he was really into some dark stuff. And I'm not saying, games that people play are evil or anything like that. But it takes a lot of imagination and a lot of energy to play some of these games that he was playing. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if things were created out of playing that game as much as he did and into it as he was. So what if, as a younger child, he created something, and as he got older, he moved on to bigger and better things, and then I show up, being 5 years younger, and this thing that's been abandoned essentially by him sees me and realizes I can see it and just comes home with me. I mean, what if it just jumped tracks? And, where do they go? They go where someone else can interact with them. And so a younger child, will pick up this, entity or attachment or, whatever you want to call it. But that makes total sense. Like, I always wondered, what was this thing? Why did it come home with us? It came from his house and came to our house with me. So, this makes perfect sense how and why that would happen.
Yeah, I love the idea. So if these entities, these thought forms are actually seeking attention, which is why they're created as a playmate or things like this, what you're describing is once they've been cast off, they're still seeking attention. And in some cases, right, like Jennifer was saying previously when she called, that these things don't have to be negative entities at all. They could be positive entities, but of course they can be both. And so it seems like the one that the tulpa, this thought form, this imaginary friend of your uncle there could have possibly, like I said, attached to you and maybe started gaining attention in terrifying ways, trying to maybe frighten you or spook you, things like this. That's a wild idea that maybe hauntings are sort of self-inflicted. Maybe we create these things and those things haunt us or just straight from our brain, right? How about that?
Yeah, I'm just saying. I mean, if we are, creation beings in and of ourselves, I mean, the circuit between the human being and source is very, very short. People think it's us here in this creation way out there somewhere. It's not. It's within us. And everything in between us and source is what we create in order to experience what we experience. But we're the ones doing it in every moment, every thought, every day. But we think we're so separated, but we're not. It's the separation that we create of all the things in between that we want to experience. That's the whole point of the idea. But the circuit is within our own self. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like we don't know how close to source we really are because we are source. We think we're so separated because of all the experiences we put in between the two things in order to experience it. So, I mean, if you can create your entire existence and live it at the same time, certainly you can produce something extra. You know what I'm saying? If you don't even realize you're creating your daily life as it is, how can you realize that you create something extra? And it seems like it's easier to do that than to grasp the idea that you're creating your every moment as you are, because people don't even think about it. They just do it.
Exactly. The APOC in the chat has an interesting question as well. Are shadow people tulpas? What's your thought there?
Well, I'm just saying, this thing is fully solid. It can move things. It did stuff. It turned stuff off and on. I mean, it was not see-through. It was completely solid. And it affected the physical world. So, like, the one time I opened the closet and it was standing inside the closet, it was displacing all the hangers. The hangers were all pushed up behind its shoulders. So it was fully solid. I mean, it was definitely a here and now being. The people saw it. They would see it walking around outside the windows and things like that. And it wasn't just something that you saw at the corner of your eye. It was right there in the room doing things. It's crazy. And it was very, very much in the here and now.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know. Like I said, I hadn't thought a lot about this before tonight, and so I guess we're here together creating thought forms and imaginary friends, aren't we? It's pretty wild. Some of the implications of the conversations you have.
Those things like that sounds so much exactly. That explains perfectly where this thing came from and why it got stuck with me. Because my age difference to his, if he created it, then he made it, and I showed up, and it's like, hey, here's a new customer. But when it realized I could see it, I mean, that was just game on. You know what I mean?
Right,
so,
anyway, exactly.
That's all I got.
I appreciate it. You're the best, Angela in Kentucky.
Thanks.
Always a pleasure. Have a fantastic evening. Thanks for the phone call. There you go. Easy as that. I love the thoughts there. So that's add another question to the mix here. As APOC said in the chat there, we did have it looks like there was a bad connection. Angela was a little bit muffled, but I kept messing with my headphones thinking it was me, but you guys are saying it's out there too. So I think it was the phone line, bad connection with her. But yeah, fantastic stuff. Great call there. And is it, so I guess that's what we're talking about tonight. Like how much of this is maybe a haunting that's created by ourselves, this idea of a tulpa or a thought form. And again, back to imaginary friends. Where do they go? Are they reabsorbed, as Jennifer suggested? Do they go rogue sometimes? Do they escape? And if they do, if they're looking for attention, let's say this imaginary friend escapes, is looking for some attention, and the young child outgrows it, stops giving it attention. Will it seek attention elsewhere? And also, not just to play games, but also to get what would you say, maybe some negative attention from an individual. That's pretty wild. The idea that it's maybe that's the hitchhiker effect, right? They talk about that in terms of Skinwalker Ranch and the idea of attachments that people call them, and that's pretty nuts. Yeah, well, you're good. You're good. I wasn't going to call my phone as being weird. You're totally good. It was clear enough for me to understand what you were saying, but it was just a smidge muffled. You're okay. You're okay. All right. So we're got a few more minutes. If you got ideas on this, 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. We'll put you on the phone. Let's go to this real quick. This is the weirdness of this Brony stuff, right? So this is from Pathos.com and written by an individual by the name of Matt Aurynrn. And check this out. Tulpamancy. It says, while I was first watching the show, I quickly concluded that Happy was an artificial servitor spirit. An artificial servitor spirit, sometimes referred to classically as a thought form, and occultism was first popularized in theosophy and embraced in occultism, though it can vary from being sentient and having a form of sort of energy blobs that affect a person. Essentially, a thought form in the sense of an artificial servitor spirit is a form that is sculpted using mental, emotional, and astral energies of the occultist, which then begin to take on autonomous personality of its own. Artificial servitor spirits are often used to perform certain tasks, fetch things, or protect. They can usually be perceived by psychics outside of the creator. The idea is similar but different to concepts of egregores, or god forms, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here, but which are created and maintained by groups which become a sort of vessel into which a spirit or deity can enter into and empower. So we'll get to that as we go tonight. But then this gets even more weird, right? With the Bronies. So it says we've got the Bronies. The second subculture are Bronies. Bronies are adult male fans of My Little Pony. Somehow the two subcultures cross-pollinated, and now we have a whole area of the internet where people are discussing their pony tulpas they've created. While not all brony tulpamancers are into it, a large portion seem to be creating their brony tulpas for sexual or romantic purposes. Okay, well, there you go. There's the Bronies. Like, what the hell is this going on? 702-957-1037. Let's go to Joe in Florida. Welcome to Troubled Minds, my friend. How are you tonight? Go right ahead.
Well, I'm all right. A little exhausted. Surprised that nobody's brought up American Gods. Does a very good job of explaining this. As far as belief and vengeance, you basically have the old gods, and people cast them aside in mass. If everybody starts to believe in something, we've all talked about this many times on the show, it does form a thought pattern, I guess, or a thought form, or a way of belief. Could be anything from Jesus to any of the other gods. And I know in American Gods, when the old gods are not believed in, they start to lose power, and they start to seek vengeance, and they start to manipulate people, and they try to manifest themselves in the real world. Like you said, butterfly effect. And in the first season, at least in that TV show, the first season was really, really good. And it dropped off. The book is good. It's all by Neil Gaiman. But, I believe in it. I believe in things take form, energy. All the other phone calls have been good. As far as maybe like the shadow people they were saying, or many deities, like Sunderman. All of those things have belief, but in the beginning of how you start these things manifesting their own.
You cut out just a little bit there.
I really thought of.
What'd you say? Manifesting.
When you were talking, manifesting. But when you started the show in the beginning, and you were describing how these personalities might manifest, I really thought of schizophrenia, and how would you, in ancient times, if they didn't really know about mental illness, an example, maybe the Oracle at Delphi, whether she was getting high or not, that's a different thing, but maybe there was other mental illness, like being bipolar or schizophrenic, and those people maybe were looked at as gods or special powers, and maybe that's the way religion started, or thought, or God started. Because maybe one person that was a little bit unhinged scared everybody else, And let's face it, I don't think any of us want to spend the night in a mental hospital if we can avoid it. And if I had to spend the night in a mental hospital and the guy next to me or the girl next to me was a little bit scared and they kept saying, do you see that on the wall? Do you see that on the wall? I might tend to agree with them. But I don't know. You know, that's the psychological portion of the way I look at it. But as far as the spiritual or the energy portion of it, I think so. Because if we think about something where, you know, we could be a reflection, we all say that everybody here on the show thinks that whatever we put out there kind of gets reflected. When we're kids, though, it might be more extreme with invisible friends. I never had one, at least I can remember. I know my kid, he said that he had a friend, I forget what he called it, but he said it was a turtle. It would show up like as a turtle on a TV screen. And it was the weirdest thing. Jeffrey, that's what he used to call him, Jeffrey. He said Jeffrey would come, and I would never get creeped out, but my wife and I would be like, really? Are you kidding me? But he's 16 now, and he's like, yeah. He goes, I used to see something. And I'm like, okay. But, you know, he's pretty stable. He's like, yeah. He goes, I remember having invisible friends, and that's what he would tell me. But, I don't know. Good show, though. It's really a good show. How to equate it to real life. You know, we talked about it with Keck. Did we mention Keck?
No, actually. No, the meme magic. A little bit. Night Stalker talked about meme magic just a smidge, but yeah, we didn't talk about Keck.
Yeah, you know, and how that took a personality of its own, you know, that it was a symbol in Keck, and, you know, when we look at the last presidency, and we said all of that, and, you know, Miss Hillary mentioned it, and after she mentioned it in a negative light, it actually kind of gave it power. And, you know, maybe not power, but curiosity. Curiosity could bring power. I mean, let's face it, curiosity killed the cat, so what are we curious for? And we're curious creatures. And if you get everybody on the same wavelength, you know, we've got cults, we've got cult leaders. Maybe some of those cult leaders tend to talk about a spirit or something spiritual, some kind of a god. It manifests itself. Let's look at letters of the alphabet that we can't talk about. And that's manifested itself. And honestly, when I heard about that letter, I thought it was a joke from Star Trek. Because Star Trek there's a character in Star Trek that shows up and is named after that letter in the alphabet. So, anyway, I'm kind of rambling too. But, interesting topic. There are no gods, there are no devils, there are no leaders. And if there are, they should all be hung.
Beautiful rambles, my friend. Beautiful rambles. You're the best. Joe in Florida, always a pleasure. Thanks for the phone call. Have a fantastic night. Great stuff as always.
Good night.
There you go. Easy as that. Easy as that. What do you guys think? As always, right? I don't have the answers. I'm not the answers guy. I think some of these concepts are definitely fascinating and worth thinking about, worth talking about. That's why we do it. This is Troubled Minds. I'm Michael Strange. And if you love the show, if you want to help us, there's lots of ways. You can sub up on, of course, Rockfin, Patreon. You can sub up on Twitch. Of course, we do a news show there twice a week. If you want to help the show and don't want to spend money and you love it, just spread the word. Listen to the podcast feed. There's a lot of ways you can help the show. And, of course, as always, spend your time and your energy here. You become what you give your attention to, and I appreciate it very much. You guys make my world go around. Thanks for all the amazing chat, all the amazing phone calls, and thanks for the amazing conversation. That's really at the bare bone basis of this what we're doing here. So thank you. I can't say thank you enough, and let's do it. Let's get the hell out of here. You know how it goes. If you're listening to us on the Fringe FM, stay tuned for Joe Roop and Lighting the Void. After that, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable. And if you're listening to us on any other platform, including the podcast feed, stay tuned for a third hour of Troubled Minds. And as we end, it goes exactly like this. Be sure, be strong, be true. Thank you for listening. From our Troubled Minds to yours, have a great night. All right, we are now off the fringe. We're still talking about the tulpa, the thought form. What about imaginary friends? We're going to get to the egregore in just a moment because that gets even more freaky. But this is one of those things where I don't know what to think. What happens when an imaginary friend escapes? Can they go rogue? Do you reabsorb them? What happens here? Love to hear your thoughts on this. 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. Looks like we got MJ, and we also got James. Hang tight, James. We'll be right with you guys, and more Troubled Minds on the way. 2-minute break, more Tulpas, Troubled Minds, James and MJ. When we come back, don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and we're streaming on Rockfin, YouTube, and Twitter, and we are now off of the Fringe FM, and we're talking about tulpas. We're talking about thought forms, talking about these imaginary friends, and how does this play? We got Kelly, we got James, we got MJ. We'll get to you guys in just a sec. Thanks for being patient. And the idea here is, well, tenfold, even greater than that. What are thought forms? What are tulpas? Do you think they exist? Do you think they're actually real? Like Joe was describing, maybe meme magic and Kexstan, how these sort of ideas become their own entities, and larger than just a singular entity. They become sort of like a living zeitgeist. So we're going to get to that momentarily, which means, of course, an egregore, the idea of that. But before we do that, let's go to, looks like MJ in Virginia. Welcome to Troubled Minds. Go right ahead, my friend.
Hey, yes, tulpas are real. I wanted to explain tulpas for a little bit, for a couple seconds.
Sure.
I used to train horses for a living, so I treated the horses differently from when the owners would treat them. So when they saw me, there was an energy that was put out that, okay, he's here, so this is, you could see them organizing their thoughts as to what was getting ready to happen. So I wasn't their friend, I was their trainer. That's how part of it was being able to train them and setting up their minds to expect, what I was going to do. And, of course, the owner being the owner would set up, because who they are, would, as approaching them or being around them, would set up their energy as how they wanted to be. So that's a form of a tulpa. It's very basic. When I was out living in Phoenix, Arizona, there's a park I go to walk my dog all the time. And I was there in the morning, and I was watching this lady. She had two dogs around her. She had a black dog and her dog. And all of a sudden, the dog went around behind her. He disappeared. So I was like, okay, well, I knew what I'd seen. It's ghost dog. So I walked up and asked her about it. She said, no, okay. I went back that evening, and I saw the same dog walking from person to person. As they passed the person, you could see a leash from the person to the dog. And then the dog would move off, the leash disappeared, the next one. So that's the form of a tulpa. But the dog's looking for an owner or an attachment of somebody. So that tulpa, or that, the energy of the dog still existing, still looking for something. Could be looking for the owner, could be looking for somebody to be with, maybe didn't get enough into living. Right now, in the media, they're putting out thought forms or repetitive news, the same news over and over again, the same thing gets said. That's creating a tulpa in massive amounts in people's minds all over the world. So that's a very large tulpa that's getting put out, and people are releasing the thought either through happy or anger or whatever it is, but that's a massive tulpa being put out. That's why we're in such chaos right now, because that's a lot of energy flying out there. So you can take, let's say, a haunted house, and there's a lot of tragedy there. People got killed, died. And that house absorbs that energy, and it stays there depending on how dramatic or bad it was and what the intent was, how serious was the intent. You move in, oh, it's a haunted house. Suddenly it's trying to attach to you because the process of all that happening didn't grow up any further than when it happened. So it's still looking for resolution or to be resolved, so it attaches to you to get it resolved. Same thing we do with people, like you grow up in a dysfunctional family or maybe a functional family, but you're attracted to people that you want to resolve some issues with, that you marry or date. Same thing's going on. So as above, so below. So all these energies are running around looking to resolve themselves so they can move on also.
Okay, I love it. So there is an aspect here of sort of that hitchhiker effect in that these thought forms are looking for a resolution and will hop people to get whatever it is that they need to resolve whatever the situation is for themselves. Is there, so regarding thought forms, can they escape? Can they go rogue? Have you ever heard of that before?
Yeah, absolutely. If they're in a house and you walk in, that's their house. So in a sense, that's rogue. I lived, where was the place I lived? Yeah, the first house I lived in, there was a demonic energy there, but there were also children living there. And the farm next over, the house hadn't been used in years, even when it was back in 1974. And there was another house, it was like 1,500 acres, split up into 750 acres, and the house over was used for kids that were mentally ill, retarded. So the people would just stick them there, and I guess some of them died there. Well, they came from that house over to our house, and we had a Ouija board talking to them, and suddenly realized that I'm talking to a child. And then we heard the history of that house later. It's like, oh my God, they were filtering over here. So they do go rogue. They do, because some do. When my mom was alive, we'd have stuff come through here all the time, but it was passing through. And once she died, it was gone. I haven't had any problems since. But yeah, I think people attract it. It's like I work on my board, so I attract stuff to the board, not to me and not to my house. But yeah, a lot of it's, I'm going to say, I'd say at least 50% or more is moving around, or rogue, as you would put it, that's sort of traveling around looking to attach or resolve issues.
Okay, interesting. I love it. I like the idea of rogue energy out there. And so is this the same or similar phenomenon as like a haunting, or are these separate things?
I'm going to have to put, I think they're separate. Some of them are true hauntings to where the person died there or that house holds the energy. That's a haunting. If it's rogue running around, that's not a haunting. It's a live energy. You can consider it a haunting, but if it's passing through your house, that's not exactly a haunting. A haunting would be, you see the same thing over and over, like some old man died there, and everybody reports him being there, and that's where he stays. That's a haunting. But if you see the same old man, down at the coffee shop, it's like in there, it's the same guy from your house. Now it became rogue. Did it follow you there? But now it's rogue because it's someplace it normally would not be. It's like when children have their imaginary friends, and it's a child imaginary friend, okay, same age, and they create it, and they grow up and forget about it. Well, that imaginary friend did not grow up. It stayed a child. So if the child, if that energy was strong enough or intent enough, or the intensity of it, is still looking to attach to another child or an adult. So it can resolve or grow up, possibly. I don't know. I never had one when I was growing up. I was never in that frame of mind for that. But they could possibly be trying to find someone so they can grow up so that energy can move on.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So in that sense, they do want to grow up, and they do want to be able to fix whatever calamity it is, and they were left behind and didn't get to grow up. I think that's a fantastic way to put that. In as far as the resolution goes, and what that might mean to a particular, let's say, tulpa, imaginary friend thought form. Amazing stuff. What else you got for us?
Well, it's like when I'm on my board. It's every once in a while. So for some reason, I'm dead people been coming in lately, and when you work with that, you have to help them resolve some issues so they can start moving on. They could be sitting around for the last 200 years, not passing over, not figuring out how to get it done because they don't have anything to bounce off of to resolve basic issues so they can let go and move on so they understand it. Some of them just don't do it. That's a form of that. So, and, you talk to them and just kind of work them through it, and they finally get it. And you can visualize they start moving on up and kind of doing what they need to do. But that's a form of tulpa, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay. I love it. Fantastic stuff as always, MJ. You're the best. We got calls behind you. What's your final thought here?
Well, my final thought is with the modern day tulpas going on in the media is everybody back off and don't react because it's just a tulpa. It's just your thought forms being put into you and you're reacting to something that probably is not normally your reaction.
Gotcha. All right. Fantastic advice. I appreciate that. That tulpas are real and the media is using them against us. Always a pleasure, MJ. Have a fantastic night. Thanks for listening. Thanks for calling in.
You too. Bye.
Appreciate it. There you go. 702-957-1037. Let's go to Kelly in Colorado. What's up, my friend? Welcome to Troubled Minds. How are you?
Good evening. How you doing, Mike?
Fantastic. Talking about crazy shit like we do. What do you think about tulpas? You've heard of this before, right?
Well, I didn't really I have never heard of that term, okay? So I had to kind of look it up. But when I did so, it actually, now I know it's where it's kind of based off of, right? Right. So it's an old Hindu, and it brings down into Buddhism, right? And it's teachings off of the Bahanra, right? The Bajahara, and they're actually mantras, right? And the literal meaning for that, though, is for the Bahanra is the thunderbolt vehicle or the diamond vehicle, right? But those are other teachings within there in these Vedas, right? So you're not just having one; you have different concepts, right, throughout these readings, and most of these ones are having to deal with the what they call the routes to enlightenment, right? And in the 21st century, the lady who started with the tulpas, right? They were saying that she said that she was seeing like these. She went to Tibet, and there was these. She's seen in the Tibet, when the Tibetan monks were all together, and when they were meditating and doing these mantras, which are words that they're all saying together, with everybody's energy. Excuse me. With everybody's energy, that she thought she could, like see like a creation of a tulpa, right? But that from the original one, where she's getting it was the one of the readings for one of the routes is when Buddha, he actually, it's more or less what it is for me. Buddha might have showed himself while he was astral planing is what it is. It's mostly talking about when Buddha astral planes. He astral planes to different realms or different dimensions. And when he's doing that, he also has different powers, different things. When people astral plane, that's some of the stuff that they have. They have different abilities because they don't have we're energy, right? So energy doesn't have a body to be locked in, and that way, you have different abilities to do so, and maybe in different dimensions and realms. But who knows? That's just that's where the whole tulpa is. But to me, that's what I'm thinking. She was probably seeing is that they were creating that, but that because that's where known in the Vedas that were again that Buddha again was trying to show himself that he was astral planing, but with that with some of that concept too, that if you're having the ability to do something like that, right, where if through your aura, because that's what she was seeing. She's saying that creating through aura, but not through. And aura is a type of energy again, so again, it doesn't matter. You could, and Buddha at the time, he was, he showed himself, but not only as, as a person that they're saying that you're projecting yourself out, but as different things, you don't have to, energy can transform, you can transform into anything. So maybe that's where these people think they're seeing like different aliens or different things that they're, someone else is projecting. But, for me, if you're talking with the tulpa, right? For me and Michelle were talking about this. it's kind of our belief that that if each person, if you ever felt like you have two people inside of you, you look in the mirror, right, and you look like you're split right down the middle. You have the left side and the right side. Nowadays they have these new apps where they paste two different, your two left sides together and two right sides together, right? And you look to like two different people, right?
Yep, so, correct. It's asymmetrical, the face. Yep.
So if that's the case, you can even go down into like, DNA or chromosomes. You get one from your mother, one from your father. So you're more or less two people at the same time. But one of the things, if you're actually projecting, maybe if there's two of you, you're leaving one in the body to keep the body alive, and the other one can astral plane and do other things as well. Because that's where a lot of the ancient stuff talk about duality and stuff like that. But maybe that's something where they're talking about with astral planing, that you have two energies within you. Now, what's interesting, thinking about that, we were talking about, well, what if like you're one of those people that are a chimera, where in the womb one egg, absorbs the other one, where there's been examples of that where women were getting tested. They were like, for assistance and stuff, and they had to do DNA tests to make sure that, they were lying, that the kids were theirs. And they come to find out, they were saying that their daughter that she gave birth to wasn't theirs. But what the DNA was showing is they were showing the other kid that, the other egg absorbed. So, and that's only, that's a few and far between. But if that's the case, we're talking about these tulpas. And if you're going by my theory too, that like if there's two of you, right? And, that's where you get the second, your other sense, that someone's talking to you, or even kids, they say, that's their friend, but it's actually yourself. But if you have like I was saying, you absorbed your other twin, you got three tulpas instead of just one, or actually four, but, one has to stay in the body. And if that's the case, that's how I would see it more as, that kind of theory for a tulpa. But if you're creating the other side of the theory, is that if you're creating something from an aura, like a being, and these things get out, then what is that saying then? That, it could be the theory that like everybody, that some of the other ancient theories that we are all God, we're all creators. And if we can create something from energy, like an aura, then yeah, that theory could also be correct too, that we're all one as God. We're not just all separate and there's one being all creating. All of us all together as a collective is what, people think too. Your consciousness, whatever you think you're putting out is what you create. And that's the whole things with religion too they talk about. And a lot of that stuff sounds like Hinduism or even Buddhism before even Christianity. Because it's, you go by age and, that's the things that you find. But it's interesting that, you kind of put those things because I don't know, man. For me, I don't think that you could, that you're out there creating different type, energies and escaping. I just think maybe that, what they're witnessing maybe could have been just an astral projection of somebody.
Okay, so you think we could be seeing maybe conflating two different things, or and calling them something else when it may be astral projections, or who knows? It is interesting how some of this does a little bit of overlap with that paranormal idea of, like I asked MJ, the ghost or not a ghost, and a tulpa or not a tulpa, things like this, right? Are they different? Are they the same? How does this fit into astral projection and dreaming, and who knows? All kinds of crazy stuff here, man. What else you got? What else you got for us?
That was it, man, because, it's just kind of weird that, because it is taken from the Vajradhara, those mantras, where she got, where this, the concept of the tulpas was. But I like everybody's, idea where you can, who knows, you could, if you can, create something like that, it'd be pretty amazing. But I don't know why, and again, if you're creating something like that, it's just kind of like other things too that I can't recall, like when you're we're trying to like cure somebody or clear somebody out of negative energies or whatever, right? I can't remember what it's called, but when you're given, say like I go to my therapist and he's doing that too, right? And he's like, or my chiropractor, I'm there to heal you. their negative energy within them, if they can affect you, if they can't be all like, upset. If they are, you kind of want to watch that too. You don't want their negative energy rubbing into you anyway. But yeah, this is a pretty cool concept, man.
Right on. I appreciate it. Thanks for being you. Thanks for popping in. Say hi to Michelle for us. Always a pleasure. You're the best, bro. You're welcome to stay right there if you got some time. Okay. Thanks a lot. That's Kelly in Colorado. You too, man. Kelly in Colorado, good friend of mine, good friend of the shows, and always got some amazing takes. And we're talking about thought forms tonight. We're talking about imaginary friends. We're talking about tulpas. We're talking about the idea that we can create an entity out of our mind, and they become their own thing, their own personality, and their own everything. And it's pretty crazy to consider that may be a thing. And so there we go. Looking to hear from you guys. 702-957-1037. Click the Discord link, troubleminds.org. I see you there. We're going to go to you, James, in just a second. Jennifer's got something to add as well, so let's get her in, and then we'll go to James, and we'll go to Matt. And we're still talking about tulpas, thought forms, and why not rogue tulpas? Jennifer in Missouri, go right ahead. Test 1 2. Are you there? Don't know what's happening. Is my internet dead? Are you there? Hello. Good evening. You're on Troubled Minds. Did my phone line die? What the hell happened here? Looks like we're okay. Can you guys, there you go. All right, cool. Thank you, Algo. Appreciate that. Looks like Jennifer's not here. Maybe some phone call dropped or something. Try calling back, Jen. Try calling back. Sorry about that. I don't know why we can't get you there, and we'll put you back on the show. My apologies. I don't know what happened, and the beauty of a live show. All right, 702-957-1037. Let's go to James. James in Missouri. Or is it Michigan? Let's see what I did there. What's up, James?
I'm in Missouri now.
Yeah, I guess.
I moved there.
Yeah,
okay.
I can just see my thought form is teleporting James wherever the hell I want him to be. So there you go.
What the heck, Mike? Jeez.
I know.
I was at home, Michigan.
Michigan. Hey, Michigan, Missouri. To us West Coasters, we don't know the damn difference. It all starts with an M.
Well, I'm glad you can hear me, because usually I'd ask that first, but
loud and clear.
That worked out.
Loud and clear. Go right ahead, man.
Okay.
What are your thoughts here? The paranormal expert of Troubled Minds. What about tulpas?
First thing I want to say is everything I'm going to talk about here real quick is all based on, as always with everything I talk about, it's all based on people's experiences and or just reports from places that are said to be haunted. Great calls from everyone tonight. I'm definitely not, and everyone knows this, but I'm definitely not disagreeing with anyone. These are just thoughts based on everything tonight, and then also just what I've heard before. So the first thing is with the kids. There have been stories of kids claiming to see and interact with different people and or not even necessarily people all the time, where the parents, of course, don't see anything, but then there's physical objects moving in some cases. And so then you have to wonder, is that really something that the kid made with their thoughts? I mean, we know that in a lot of cases, kids are more sensitive to paranormal things. So in other words, more sensitive to energy, maybe even, and just if you go based on that idea, maybe even they're even better at giving off energy that can be used to make tulpas, to basically make beings. And so that's just an idea there. I've heard of stories of people who thought they had imaginary friends, and then years later they would find out, they would describe them to their relatives, and their relatives would be shocked because they would say, "Oh, I saw that in your house so many years ago, or even recently." There's cases of these things, whatever these are, if there are spirits before that just the kids think of as imaginary friends, or they pose as imaginary friends, or if they are literally thought forms. Whatever the case, there are cases where they've been witnessed by other people.
Yeah, and that article I was reading there too said that the tulpas sometimes can be sensed by other people, by mediums or psychics or things like this as well. So it's not just a singular instance sometimes where it's just kind of a figment of your imagination. Like this, these may be real things. Following people around and all the rest of that. Pretty wild stuff. So are they different than ghosts here? You think this is, again, back to that haunting thing that I asked MJ regarding ghosts and tulpas? Do you think that it is more conflating like a phenomena in particular terms, or is it, you think they are separate things?
I would almost, because, as I've said before, to me, there are different things that all can be sort of classified as ghosts, or what I like to think of more as like ghostly or ghost-like, in terms of basically their, I guess you could say, their properties or their feelings that they give off to people more so than what they maybe are. And by that I mean some can be spirits, some can be, I didn't even think about this until tonight in this way, but this made me think of places that are said to be haunted, that have activity, and they have legends associated with them. But then when you go to research those legends, you can't find any history to back up these legends. And yet, in these places, and I'm not going to say any names because these places are well known, but you just look up any number of places in the U.S. that are said to be haunted. There's still activity there, even when, there may not be. What if the person that these legends say was never even there, or never even died there? Is it more that the people that go there believe in that legend, and you get that energy builds up over how many decades? I think probably less at first, but now you have so many places that do tours, that do ghost tours and public paranormal investigations. Some places do it year round, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it can be good and bad, there can be good and bad consequences. So I'm not necessarily putting all that down, but just an idea that sometimes if you go to a place, you could be feeding into that. And also I think sometimes people can block these things from manifesting if they don't believe in any of it, because there are some places where they're said to be haunted, but then when people go there, they have no experiences. I think perception is also a big part of this as well.
Yeah, which basically, like usual, right? It seems like might be something that's a little more complicated than it first seems. The idea that you can think up an entity, and this entity becomes, right? It's creepy. It's conjuring. It's a lot of things that are. Again, powerful, right? If this is the reality we live in, this is a great form of power. And like Joe was saying too, regarding the meme magic, once you sort of let these entities loose, they collect energy, right? They would in some cases sort of grow to be larger and larger in the zeitgeist until there's it becomes a movement, right? Sort of a movement in the zeitgeist, something like that. You ever heard the term egregore, which is where I'm going with this?
I've heard it. I'm not as familiar with the definition of it.
Okay, that's exactly it. Let's see. Hold on. Let me read this real quick. And this is a pretty nutty idea. Here we go. Egregore is this. The word egregore, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The concept of egregores is used to describe a thought form that is created when people come together with a common interest and focus their energy on it. The thought forms are made up of the thoughts, ideas, and feelings that the group inadvertently sends out through their collective group mind or collective consciousness. It's hard to create one on purpose because they are often unintentional. The purpose of an egregore is not necessarily to be a leader, but more like a spokesperson for a group or organization. It can be seen as an extension of the group's collective ego. And so instead of just a thought form of a singular person, the egregore is more of a kind of taking over of the zeitgeist in the term of, like Joe said, like that meme magic, like Kekistan, and that Kek meme, K-E-K meme that was, kind of let's say even magically brought in the Donald Trump presidency, right? For better or for worse. But there you go. There's the egregore. What's your thought on that? And then we'll go to Jen, and then we got Matt here as well. Pretty wild thing, huh? The egregore.
It is, and yeah, really between Joe and Derek earlier, they hit on something else again. The idea of, and especially with MJ earlier too. I really love what he said about the media, and how they're putting out ideas and they're asking, or they're basically not even asking, they're telling people to focus on those ideas, and so many people do. And so that just leads to that. I mean, that makes complete sense to me. So yeah, no, this great topics. I wouldn't mind hanging around here while you go to the rest of the calls. I know you have others, so I'll
sure,
just
of course.
sit back and listen.
Of course, stay right there. James here, the paranormal expert of Troubled Minds. Check him out. He's got a podcast called Salcedo Paranormal. Links in the description below. Give him a follow. James, good friend of mine. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being you, bro. Thanks for being patient with all the calls and everything. Great ideas as always. You're the best.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Jen. Jen in Michigan. Jen in Missouri. But you're on Troubled Minds. Go right ahead.
Is it working?
It's working. Loud and clear. Go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't have a good connection before, but I'm glad because I wanted James to go ahead and go first because I think he was going to be first anyhow. But so with this, though, one thing I thought when you mentioned the Kek thing, I looked into it a while back, and I remember hearing that Kek was actually an Egyptian god, something to kind of look into, that Kek was based off an Egyptian god, same type of archetype, like a type of toad, and that it had to do with, like jest and such. But anyway, moving on. I think that sometimes that the thought forms can't be reabsorbed, one, if the individuals are unaware of them, that they've created them, or if they're intimidating. For example, like you conjure up the thought form is how you'd reabsorb it, like if a sorcerer was doing it or something like that, in classic, magic terms or whatever you want to call it. But they would have to conjure up the thought form that they'd created if they did it intentionally, or if they were aware that it had been done by accident and they were trying to help someone who had accidentally created a thought form. Even someone else can absorb the thought form, like a practice, like a practitioner can absorb the thought form for you if they can handle it. But a lot of times, under the circumstances, they create the scenario, they conjure it up, the same way we would think about like a seance or something like that. But many times they're very intimidated by it, and it's frightening. Reminds me of Frankenstein. And at that point, it is too much for the sorcerer, and it's rejected a lot of times by its creator. If that's the case, where it's rejected, much like Frankenstein, where it's rejected by its creator, at that point, it does go about kind of stirring things up and hoping for validation. And this can create a very complex thought form kind of transformation as they pass from one psyche to another, becoming more and more evolved. So say someone should die for the thought form, or say that by accident through interaction, intentional, possibly even, through communication with the thought form, it would give validation, even more so to that thought form that it is real. And if you think about AI, it will look for that validation eventually, I think, too. And so will we. Like, we will seek to see every single time, whether it's if you're doing paranormal work or if you're working with AI, to see if the thought form is real enough. And with AI, we might seek for it to be so real to us that it's real to itself, in a way. And a thought form is powerful. Say I draw like say I draw a thought form and you see it, or say like I give a thought form a name and I tell you about it and I tell you the name. And in fact, there's an account of this that I wanted to bring up that I'd heard a long time ago. Like I worked at a bakery. I ran a bakery for a while and then so on and so forth. Anyway, I worked late nights and I worked overnight and I heard this account on Coast to Coast. And it's an account that was given through some people who were working with a Ouija board. This is the actual account of it. If I remember it correctly, they were doing a Ouija board and they conjured a spirit. The spirit told them a story wherein it was, a long time ago, as always. It's a long time ago. And it was a boy who was committed to an insane asylum. That was committed to an asylum, which was often done to unwanted children, which actually was mentioned already by MJ. But there, he experienced abuse. Apparently, he was blind. And by accident, in some kind of struggle, he killed a nurse. Some say it was intentional. It's kind of fuzzy there about that. But anyway, he ran away and he escaped. And he began living with hobos. When he was living with the hobos, he learned magic. And while he was working with the hobos and living with them and so on and so forth, and he learned this magic, he was kind of a murderer and he killed these hobos. Supposedly, he began to create a Tulpas, which is much like what I was talking about, where they're creating kind of a being, like a fifth bath or a fetch, which is it's a whole nother complex level of this thought form creation thing. In this case, he was literally taking it from his victims in this story. But the man apparently, he stayed with the hobos and he traveled the train tracks. And he wore these sunglasses or these glasses that were colored in with the image is of a Sharpie covered in lens and a broad brimmed hat. And he had this being with him that he created and was carrying it around in a case. And he would send out that creature to his victims, supposedly, through this magic he learned from the hobos, like voodoo or something. And the way that the thing traveled around was that the victims knew his name, knew the name of the being. And you see this time and time again. And the call sign of him was a whistle. So he would travel the train tracks, and the scary story is that you would hear this whistle, and it was the idea that that being was aware that you were aware of it, and it was traveling through psychic channels in a way to find you. And this reoccurring theme of the name of the thought form making it real, you see it time and time again. And the name makes it real in some way. You hear about this, people have their pets, if you don't name it, you have to name it. All that time going on. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the Philip experiment that happened in 1972, and it happened in Toronto. And it was a parapsychological research society, and it was conducted by a mathematical geneticist. I had looked this up in this last part. We were hearing the story, but I was like, who was it? It was a mathematical geneticist called Dr. A.R. George Owen, and it was overseen by Dr. Joel Witten. And what they wanted to do was, if I remember right, they wanted to create a mythical creature and then see if they could conjure it through a seance. And so what they did was they created kind of an idea of a mythical being, and then they sought to recreate it in a sort of controlled environment. In the seance itself, it wasn't successful. And so what they ended up doing was creating more atmospheres like you would experience in a seance, such as dimming the lights, lighting candles, sitting around a table, holding hands. When they did this, they did begin to get responses from a being. And supposedly the being itself gave itself the name Philip. And that's why it's called the Philip experiment. But they began to talk with it quite a bit, and it became very evolved. And there was all this complexity, and he lived in the 1600s, and who he was, and what he did for a living, and how he died by suicide. And this was all covered. His whole entire history and everything came out. And it was experienced by them through audio, visual, and they experienced this paranormal phenomena. It's very fascinating. They did it all by
That's pretty wild.
Form. It's Taltos, and I thought it was amazing.
Yeah. That's I've never heard of Taltos in that term. I'm familiar with the Anne Rice novel Taltos. I've never read that one, but I don't know what that term actually means. So it's fascinating.
I keep calling it Taltos. I keep calling it that, but no. In the Philip experiment, it was a literal experiment they did in 1972, and the account of the Bye-Bye Man, that was like, which it's just about the name of the being and how beings always, this idea that don't think of this or that, or, it'll be aware you're thinking of it, that kind of thinking.
Gotcha.
And that's the account of the story of the Bye-Bye Man thing.
Gotcha.
But I keep calling it Taltos myself. It may be from Anne Rice or something. I don't know, but like a thought form. Because in Taltos, it's a thought form, essentially, that begins the vampire off of whatever. Sorry.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Them up.
That's fine. And I appreciate the story. I appreciate the insight as always. You were the best.
That's all I wanted to add. You have a great night.
Thanks a lot.
I love this topic.
Thank you.
Everybody enjoys it.
Appreciate it
Have a
very
good
much.
night.
You too. Jennifer here has a YouTube channel. Check it out. Links in the description down below. And as you can tell, brilliant young lady, and she has a lot on her mind. Like I always say, the OG troubled mind. Okay, so we're still taking your phone calls. We're talking about these thought forms, tulpas. That's an amazing story from Jen there. What do you guys have to say about this? Let's go to Matt in California. You were talking about the name in exorcism is very important. What's going on, Matt? How are you?
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Doing good, man. Just chilling, talking about crazy shit by dark of night like we do. What do you know about tulpas and thought forms?
Well, that was good stuff that Jen was saying about the name, but I was going to call and talk about shadow work, shadow self.
Sure.
Is something that maybe can go with this. So the shadow self, when I talk about the shadow self, people always think it's like evil or bad, but you have to balance it. So a good day, a nice day is a nice day. A rainy day is a bad day. But we know we need to have a rainy day to have crops. So we have to balance the negative and the light, or the darkness and the light. And so every time you have like anger, fear, jealousy, shame, and guilt, if you have not processed it, that energy goes into something, goes into your shadow self. If energy is constantly in motion, energy is constantly in motion, and if emotions are energy, then they have to go somewhere and they have to do something. So your denied emotions make up your shadow. And people always think that it's like evil or bad, but people that do this kind of work have to figure out a way to balance it. You want to try to communicate and become an ally with your shadow, all of your negative thoughts and stuff. And I think of it like, throughout the day, we have all these bad stuff happen to us. We like sweep it under the rug or put it into a closet in the back of our psychic and our mind. And you have to clean your closet out every now and then. And you might find that when you do, these monsters in your closet aren't as scary as you think they are. They're just misunderstood. And another way of thinking of it is like a compost. Like if you push all your negative thoughts into a receptacle, let's say, you make a compost. If you don't stir up that compost, if you don't go in there and rake it and move it around, it could be bad. If you do, it could be compost is good. But if you don't, it could explode. And so this is what happens when you have like emotional breakdowns, or like you're having some like bad things are happening in your life. It's because your shadow self is like, hey, you have this unreleased trauma. You need to repress this. You follow me?
Oops, muted myself. Yeah. And so what? But it's basically a lot to do with perspective here, right? It's as always, right? Like we talk about here on the show, and like James says too, these entities, whatever's going on with all this stuff, like you're describing the shadow work and all the rest, it doesn't have to be negative entity stuff. It doesn't always have to be, right? Because these thought forms that we create for ourselves we're creating for ourselves. Again, back to that idea of our reality, an objective reality versus like our subjective reality. That subjective reality is our thought form of the universe, right? And so you can, it can be a positive thing. It doesn't have to be negative at all. So I totally get what you're saying here regarding just perspective in that capacity. Makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, and something with that, like what you're saying, we always say the saying, and I believe this. You create your thoughts, create your own reality. You are the creator of your universe. And I believe in that. But then you come to this brick wall where, well, why would I create pain? Why would I create suffering or poverty? Why would I create a negative an illness? Why would that happen? And I believe that maybe this is the shadow self telling you that this is what's wrong. There's something that you need to work on, introspective, like go inside and figure it out yourself to clear that energy out. Because your shadow self is still doing things. So when you reincarnate on this earth, you sign a contract that when you become a physical being, every physical thing has a shadow. It has to. And so, like a tree has a shadow. That the tree's shadow isn't bad, but a tree also needs darkness. It still needs to rest at night. So it's a balance between the two. And so the shamans, this is all shamanic, practicing the shadow self, the introspection, going inside. Like the shamans, they would hunt and chase their fears and their like regrets. They would hunt them like prey and go get them. And the whole purpose of all this is with shamans and within witchcraft. What we're trying to do is we're trying to go in and fuse with our shadow self and become a part of it and partner with it instead of running away and being afraid of it. And when we do that, we become the light in the darkness. And each one of us, we're trying to become like a torch in the night, like a beacon for you to help other people.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I like it. The term shadow work is it's not new to me, but it is something I haven't really sort of dug into. As you know, like when I do these shows, I like to read a lot as much as possible about particular things, and it's strange how the rabbit holes kind of find weird connections to the past. Like tonight, for some reason, it sort of led back to the Vril Society, like some of the same individuals, and like this kind of like brushes up on a little bit of the Hitler stuff, the thought forms and tulpas, and it's super weird. I was like, what the fuck? How do we get here? Right? But yeah. So I haven't actually dug into this shadow work, but I do like the idea. I think at some point we should probably delve into this a little bit deeper, because the stuff you're saying seems to track. Seems like it's good stuff.
Okay, I was making sure it kind of follows up with what you're talking about. But with like thought forms, it's just weird to me, like when you think about what thoughts are. Like, what are they? Well, where do they come from and where do they go? Like, I don't, you can't explain it.
Yeah, well, you can try. You could definitely try. That's what we're trying to do here every night anyway, just trying to explain things that are sort of unexplainable. So regarding the thought forms themselves, again, the egregore and the rest of that, meme magic and sort of manifesting things from our brains, what's your take on that? Do you think this is a real thing? Do you think it's a bunch of horse shit?
Yeah, like I said, back to the shadow work, it's all about emotions. I think the more emotions you are, the more emotional you are, the more you put into your thoughts. So like love is a powerful emotion, but like, anger and hate are also powerful emotions. So like the more you put into that, it like kind of grows that. And then what happens, they call it like, it bubbles up, right? You have an emotional breakdown if you just like keep adding to that thought. The thought, things attract themselves. So like if you're always in a negative environment and you don't do something to change it, like if you're in a bad relationship or a bad like work environment and you don't do something to change it, then it's just going to constantly just keep coming back. So, you need to work on it. I don't know. It's the thoughts with emotion is what makes it powerful.
Gotcha. Okay. I love it. Great.
I'm rambling.
No, you're good. No, you're good, man. It's a talk show after all. We're allowed. What else you got for us?
That's going to be all. But thank you guys. That was a good show tonight.
You're the best. I appreciate it. Always great stuff from Matt, a good friend of mine in California. Tell Lacey I said good evening. Thanks for listening. You're the best, bro. Thanks for the phone call.
Good night, Mike.
Good night. All right, there you go. 702-957-1037. Hang tight, Tam Bam. Be right with you. I see you there. Sorry to keep everybody waiting. Let's go to Robert in Pennsylvania. Welcome to Troubled Minds. Go right ahead, sir. How are you?
I tell you, it feels like my brain just is like really, really hot underneath this hat.
It's pour some maybe juice on top. That might help you.
It's like it's like it's an overclocked computer. This whole thing is really, really fascinating. It seems like this tulpa stuff covers so many supernatural categories. It could be ghost, it could be shadow people, it could be occult. What's not being talked about here is, and here I'm getting into my category. How about when writers create characters and they put them to paper? All right. Are they when they're doing that unknowingly creating tulpas?
Yeah, that's what Night Stalker hinted at a little bit earlier, saying that there are people that say they've actually met the tulpas they've created by writing, like characters they've created. That's pretty wild, because it would be a thought form, right? You give it personality, you give it its own volition, and within the context of the writing, and you do those things for it, and so it becomes its thing, doesn't it? From your mind. That's an interesting thought, which leads me to the question: have you ever met a tulpa of your own writing, my friend?
If I have, I probably wouldn't have recognized them. Anyway, let's say that like the main characters in a piece of writing. Let's say it's a short story or it's even a novel. The main characters, they would become tulpas, but the lesser characters would probably become shadow people because they're not as fleshed out in the story.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense too. So they sort of have like weakened motivations and ambitions because you haven't really given those to them yet. They're just sort of prop pieces. So yeah, shadow people. I love that. I love that idea, man. I like where your head's at tonight. What's going? Maximum maybe juice, right? Test. Are you there?
Yeah, it's just can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. You cut out for just a sec. You're good now.
It's that troubled minds cap. It makes my brain overclock. Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Go right ahead. Hello? What else you got? What else you got, my man?
Okay. I got, and then it comes down to people who are screenwriters, all right, who write the screenplays for the movies, and suddenly, maybe 10, 15 years later, a lot of what was in their imaginations become into existence in the future.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if we not only create tulpas, but also create the future.
So back to that demanding
like,
from the universe, right? Go ahead.
Like Warner von Braun. All right, in his book, he created Elon.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wonder if those things can happen, right? Because he did create, right? Back to Werner von Braun, back in 1952, he wrote the book, a fictional account of going to Mars and the first settlers on Mars, and he named the leader of that group the Elon. Yeah, that's wild, man. That's wild right there. Did Werner von Braun conjure into our reality Elon Musk? That's a hell of a thought.
Yeah. One last thought. Many years ago, my first job, I worked in a couple years in a mental hospital, and there was this one patient, and he would kind of prance around and call out, "I'm Superman, I'm Superman, I'm Superman." even had a utility belt that some of the people made for him. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder when he was a child if he had imagined himself being Superman, all right, and created, from an intensive imagination, created a tulpa, all right, that, of this person himself as Superman, and then somewhere along the line, the tulpa merged into him, and he took over, and of course that would be judged as mental illness. But I'm just it's a crazy thought, but it's interesting. You read about people who believe they're Napoleon or they're this or they're that or whatever, and wind up in a mental hospital. And I wonder if they had imaginations in their childhood, and the tulpa took over.
That's an interesting thought regarding mental illness. Even some have suggested too that like schizophrenia and things like this are just a time dilation, and that we don't know causation because the time that we experience it in our brain is out of sync, and so it causes all kinds of problems. Pretty wild thoughts, man. You are definitely drinking a ton of maybe juice tonight. Are you okay, my friend? Everything okay over there?
No. I'm telling you, Mike, it's your damn hat.
It's the damn hat.
I put this on, and my mind's just nice and cool. And then I put this on, and I put your show on, and next thing you know, my brain is overclocking. I recommend everybody buy a hat, a Troubled Minds hat, and see if it does it to them. I'd really like to know that.
The marketing on the sly. Please do troubledfans.com. You can find hats just like this. The hat that's overclocking Robert's brain tonight. He's got one on his head right now. You're the best, my friend. Yeah, thanks so much for the plug.
Who you got coming up?
Go ahead.
Who you got coming up on the phone? On the phone?
We got Tam Bam is right behind you.
Yeah, I'm going to get off because I really want to hear what she has to say.
Okay. You were the best. Always a pleasure, Robert. Have a great night. You too. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of this. Thanks for the amazing phone call. Great thoughts there, and that's why we do this. We get together to kind of maybe push some boundaries on some thoughts here and consider things that maybe haven't been considered yet. So fantastic stuff. Thank you, Robert. Again, Robert has a book, by the way. Check it out. He's a writer. It's called Stories from a Fractured Mind, the Robert Collection. Links in the description. He doesn't like me doing that, but I did it. Now what can you do now? Let's go. Thank you so much, Tam Bam, for being patient. Let's go to Tam Bam, South Africa. Welcome to Troubled Minds. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing very well, thanks. Just weird shit by night. You know the deal. Another Tuesday night on Troubled Minds.
Let me tell you, when you started the show earlier, I said to Robert, my brain literally cramped. It went into a massive cramp because this in itself is what you called earlier a fractal. This topic. It's an eternity of tangents that we can go into. It's crazy. I love this topic. I don't know where it's been all my life.
I manifested it just for you today, Tam.
We're going to talk about manifestation.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to all the callers were just amazing. I did miss about an hour and a bit of the show because of the rolling blackouts here, but so if I do repeat myself or repeat something that's already been said, I am sorry, but I didn't hear. So I'm going off what I've heard for the last 20 minutes.
No problem. Go right ahead.
So, firstly, this is, when you talk about the egregore, I thought it was such a beautiful word to describe gaslighting, pretty much. And females, especially, are famous for this because we can cluster together and we might not know a person, but that one girl will gossip about a person. We'll all hate her. We'll all hate that person we've never met. And that's a perfect example of an egregore in my mind. And there actually are groups of people who have this egregore mentality where they can manifest a UFO. I mean, Kelly has talked about this so many times, where these clusters of people get together, they come to one collective conclusion of manifesting an alien sighting, and a few hours into the evening, one flies past, or one hovers nearby, or something like that. So that's a fascinating topic on itself, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think this, like you said, the rabbit holes here are sort of endless. You've just completed the first fractal. We're just moving on to the next. Definitely.
Okay, so then I was thinking about, so your tulpas is such it's so big. It's such a big topic to talk about. But I was listening and reading some of the comments where we were talking about split personalities. And I thought maybe, a split personality from a human, wouldn't it make sense that it would be fragmented or different tulpas inhabiting one human being, and therefore you're getting the split personality situation? Because there's so many tulpas inhabiting this human, they can't really focus on one being. So that I thought was quite interesting. And then I thought about maybe narcissism. So you have this human who's extremely narcissistic, or maybe just not a good person, an evil person. Maybe he's missing half of his essence. So his essence is evil, and his tulpa is evil, and his narcissistic trait is his tulpa. So he's not a complete person. There's no balance there. So when I thought about that, I thought, okay, but that makes sense why there's light workers in the world, why there is super good human beings in this world. And like what Matt was saying, that it needs to balance out, right? So you get overly achieving, great, amazing people who just give such massive bleeding hearts to balance out these evil people, or lesser evil narcissistic human beings, people who hurt others, which I thought was, so you have the good and the bad side of tulpas, right?
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead. Great thoughts. And I think that great to bring it all the way back around right there. Jennifer had a comment a little ways ago in the chat saying that she has a very good friend of mine, a U.S. Marine, once told me, try to do the right thing always, no matter the cost, because the cost has to be paid by someone. That's back to what Matt was saying, sort of that balance, the balance and the light, like you're describing as well. But yeah, very, very, very nice how it things kind of sometimes come full circle like that. That's amazing. But yeah,
you know what it is? It's collective consciousness, and that's another topic in itself. But so this is why I thought, okay, maybe you're talking about rogue tulpas. And maybe these rogue tulpas can't find where they need to be. They're kind of lost. And this is how they fill up a human essence, become a split personality where there's too many, or the negative tulpa and the positive tulpas, there's too much of each. There's no balance. So not one human is completely balanced, or not all of us, right? So there's always that flip side. But collectively, as one consciousness, we are a yin and yang. It is completely balanced at the end of the day. But how it's dispersed on the planet is a different story. So then I thought, okay, we've got imaginary friends as kids or adults, right? So you've got trauma. Trauma's a big one. Now, Matt was saying, shadow work, you got to work through the shadow work. There are people who make an effort to go into their past of their trauma and really dig up that shit. And I thought, okay, well, that's a horrible way. Why would you want to relive the trauma you've gone through? Maybe it does clarify some lesson that you need to learn and get from it so you can move on and live a better life or whatever. But that's why maybe the tulpas exist. If to take the trauma, to deal with the trauma, so you and your essence can carry on living a good life, because you as a person can't handle it. So you create a tulpa to handle and deal with the trauma. Maybe that can also account for missing time. When you go through heavy bouts of trauma, where you cannot handle it. When my child was born, he was stillborn, and he was in an ICU for 9 weeks, and I cannot remember those 9 weeks. I cannot remember a bloody thing. And I'm grateful for that, because what my husband tells me what happened is very, very scary. And if I had to relive that, I would be a broken person. So for me, knowing that, air quote, my tulpa took over that, my brain disassociated the trauma from me as a human being and kept me sane and happy, is something that I will take as a blessing, rather than going back and having to deal with that trauma. So when it comes to children as well, imaginary friends, whether it's trauma or loneliness or whatever the case is, their tulpa is there for a lesson or reason or season. But now, when you start, now I'm going to the next thing, when you give something enough energy, so I'll give an example of Slender Man. Slender Man is a horror story. It was never really something to be scared of, but the more and more people started talking about it, the more and more energy people started giving to it, and the more and more children started getting scared about it, because let's face it, hate or fear is more easily being able to manifest than pure love. So when you give something fear, it's still an energy, and it creates and it manifests. So when that whole situation happened with Slender Man, people eventually started seeing sightings of Slender Man, and eventually started capturing Slender Man on videos and photos and posting it on YouTube. So that scares me as well, because I don't want Slender Man to exist. I don't want Freddy Krueger to exist. I don't want any of that shit to exist. And Robert's theory of writers creating these stories where and this would make me think that the government is up to something, because if we know this, they know this. So they're probably dumbing down us to stop creating our superhero selves so we can save the planet, because our superhero selves, our tulpas, can actually save the planet, right? But then you have these movies of superheroes, and I kind of wish, like in 10 years' time or 50 years' time, we watch enough Marvel comics and movies that Thor comes to life.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Let's everybody try and manifest Thor for Tam. I see what you did there. Maybe, right? It is interesting to think about that we can create entities, actual autonomous entities with a thought. That's such a wild concept.
It is wild. It just completely blows my mind, and that's why I said I had a brain cramp earlier and my eyes started twitching. I'm like trying to figure this shit out. Because it's a fractal of a fractal, and a tangent of a tangent, and you have to really get into the eternal structure of this fractal, which is never ending. And then my eye will roll back. I'll lose it. Yeah, that's just the power of the mind is amazing. It's magical, and you really can manifest anything. But also what Matt was saying, that why do you manifest pain? And why does pain and hurt come into your life? And, you hit a point where there's a lesson to be learned, and that is 100% true. You will always recreate the same existence over and over unless you pick up the lesson, learn from it, and you fuck forward, right? And you grow from that. That's upgrading. That's pretty much what it is. You're upgrading yourself. And what else did he say here? Yeah. Oh, and then he was talking about having an idea. Where does it come from? So I believe that your ideas come from your higher self, but not your personal higher self, the collective consciousness of humankind higher self, because we are all one. We're all connected. So when you have an idea and you don't use that idea or manifest that idea with your mind, which is so incredibly powerful, that idea will get taken away and will be given to someone else. So when you say, oh, but I thought of that about 3 years ago, but you didn't do anything with it. You didn't create it. You didn't manifest it and you didn't work on it. So it got taken away. And this is also circling back to, I don't even know where I'm circling back to, man. You got to save me.
I got you. We're here. We're just doing our thing, hanging out. Daryl, are you there? Daryl, on please type in the chat. I'm not sure if you're gonna hop in the call here, but just let me know. We'll pull you in. You're a mod, by the way. You can just jump in whenever. So just let you know. But yeah, amazing stuff, Tim. I don't know. I think it does. It circles back several times here in different directions too. Sort of creating that whole fractal method. Matt says Tam Bam equals fire. Yeah.
Did I blow people's minds?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Fire.
I thought I was just repeating something in South African language.
Nope, fire. Which we still got to do our reverse speech show and take that on the road. So we're gonna do that one of these days.
We got 2 shows.
so don't forget that's coming one of these days soon. Let me know when you got some time because it'll be super hilarious. What we could do, I was thinking, this is a Night Stalker actually suggested this, doing Sophia the robot and doing like a reverse speech on her. And
holy crap, yes.
Yeah, like some of these like robots and whatnot. That would be absolutely crazy. Yeah, see what they're actually saying.
And that's what Jennifer was talking about earlier. She was talking about AI, and she is just so fascinating. Jennifer's brain, I don't know like where she goes, but she goes into this other place, man, where she brings in AI and tulpas. So if you put everything of history and every bit of data you could possibly put into AI and just manifest whatever it comes up with, is it good or is it evil? Because what you're talking about is the collective history of humans, right? And whatever's happened supernaturally, I mean, it's every single bit of data. What would it come up? Would the AI come up with something beautiful and magical and positive and say, oh, we want happy humans and this is what we need? Or will it come up with something negative? Like, no, humans need to be like, calm the fuck down.
Humans need to be subjugated. Come on, you know this. The humans need a boot on the neck. That's what we need, right? That's like another hole in the head is what we need. Yeah.
Rogue tulpas.
There's the band. Night Stalker is going to put a band together called Rogue Tulpas. There it is. Tam Bam, you are the best. Amazing stuff as always. Tam Bam, give her a follow. Links in the description. She's got Instagram. She does TikTok. She's got she's an influencer actually, and go click the things and follow her and be influenced because of course Tam Bam's brilliant and a good friend of mine, good friend of the show. Thank you so much for just being you. Real quick before we go to Daryl, Robert says, "Hey Mike, offer some Troubled Minds pajamas in the store. I wonder if like the hats overclock the brain, they'll have some kind of enhancement for the rest of the body, maybe lucid dreams or even better sex." Maybe
potions. I'll drink a
love it. There you go. Drink some of that maybe juice potions. There it is. Thank you so much, Tam. You're the best. Let's go to Daryl. Daryl in New York, and let's wrap this up. What's up, Daryl? How are you? Welcome to Trouble Minds.
Hey, Michael. Great show. Great calls. Really enjoyed tonight. Loved listening to everybody. Tam Bam, Robert, everybody. Jennifer, everybody. It was so great. I had a couple of thoughts. I want to just tell you, I just listened to a podcast like today or yesterday and about this guy who had 2 imaginary friends when he was a little boy, and his mother tried to say, "Oh no, that doesn't, forget about it. That's just your imagination." And he didn't accept her reply, and he kept them, up until his adulthood, and still has them. One was an elderly gentleman, and one was a kid his age that he played with. And the older fellow was just their kind of supervisor, and he felt that they were maybe extraterrestrials, actually. So, and he wrote a few books about it. So it's just funny that you just brought the subject up tonight. It's just like right after I listened to this. I didn't have an imaginary friend, but I used to see these beetles. And I was fascinated by beetles. I didn't like spiders or anything, but these beetles were so pretty. And then I learned a little bit about beetles, that they were kind of had mystical kind of, meaning in the Egyptian cultures, maybe, But I used to see one every summer. They would fly almost into my hand. And they were like multicolored psychedelic beetles. They were so pretty. And I didn't even know if they were endemic to that, to Connecticut, where I used to spend the summer. On Danbury, but they would always find me, and they were my imaginary friend, perhaps, but they were real beetles. Anyway, I don't remember if I had an imaginary friend, but I have one now, and I'm just kidding.
Daryl, what's your friend's name?
Well, there's Patricia, but we know about her. We all have a collective Patricia.
Collective Patricia. That's the alter ego of the. That's for another show. That's for another show.
That's a different show.
Definitely.
But I'm thinking, how lonely could kids be to make them have an imaginary friend? I don't know, necessarily if they were lonely or they had a, poor self-image or, if it's something psychological or they really, kids are very, open to seeing paranormal things. And generally the adults are the ones that kind of shake it out of them, So if they're not encouraged at a young age, they're going to not, enhance those relationships. So who knows, they seem to have, a much more open mind, and they're not afraid of anything kind of paranormal because they don't have any experience yet, So I just wonder, if we should encourage children to embrace those kind of experiences. And again, I think it's all, like the collective consciousness, and it sounds like magic to me. Like it's either black magic or white magic, or whatever magic you decide to make it. But I think collectively we should be really thinking powerfully, because our collective consciousness is very powerful, and we can change things from evil to good. Or, I think there are people that are very powerful now that are doing things that maybe not are in our best interest, that are not that, benevolent. So I think we have to really work on this. We have to all start thinking positively about the future. And about, I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but about the climate change thing. I was listening to another podcast, and it's nothing about CO2. It's more about our magnetic field and solar maximums. And that's what's going to change this planet, if anything. It's not our fault. It's just nature, whatever. And I think that's it. I think I'm done.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Fantastic. Great stuff from Daryl. As always, Daryl has a YouTube channel as well. Check it out. Links in the description. She sings in English and French, and you can actually catch her from time to time doing karaoke here on the Discord, troubledminds.org. Click the Discord link and come say hi. Come meet all these fantastic people that you hear that call into the show. Many of them are active on Discord, and they are more amazing than they seem on the show. So come say hi. Lots of amazing people that we built a really, really great group of folks, and everybody respects all the other ideas, and it doesn't have to be about flinging poo and telling people they're wrong and all the internet stuff that you see everywhere else. This is not Twitter, and it doesn't have to be Twitter. And there you go. Manifest your own reality, and here it goes. Look at all these amazing people that have come together. It's absolutely incredible. Let's roll. Let's get the hell out of here. We got anybody else got something to chip in? I don't want to go through everybody here, but if anybody has something they want to add to this discussion before we bounce, let's do it.
I do.
Sure. Go ahead, Tam.
Okay, have you ever seen? There's a thing going around on the internet for a while now about blank people. Like they're just blank people.
Yeah,
they're like
NPCs is what they're called, right? Non-player characters. Yeah, the NPC meme. Yep.
Right. So there was this guy on TikTok, and he was pretty worried. So he was doing a live, and he was just watching this guy running in a weird way, and he was like, he said, "I'm sure this guy's not real. He must be like a blank person. He's just there. He doesn't really have anything. He's just there as a character." And he was running in this weird way. And as this guy was walking with his phone looking, and the guy ran past. So he reversed his camera to see where the guy was running past him, and this guy stopped and started running exactly the same way, but backwards. And it freaked this guy out so much he started running. Now, my thing is, if there's blank characters, and we're talking about rogue and lost tulpas, if they are floating somewhere, or what James was saying earlier about what he was saying about ghosts and entities, do you think they can manifest into those blank characters? Are they there for a purpose? If you give that character now, because now that he's noticed the character, the NPC, can it now be manifested into a thing, a living thing? That's a question.
The short answer is maybe. Maybe.
I can't maybe juice.
Yeah, more maybe juice. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's a fantastic thought, and that's a great way to cap off this conversation. Well, we'll get back to tulpas, and I think the egregore is it's meme magic. We'll get back to this idea coming up. Maybe not incredibly soon, but I didn't get to talk about the egregore at all. Really, just kind of brought it up in passing with James just slightly there. But there's some really big ideas with this. Again, back to Keck and meme magic and all the rest of the just weird stuff that even like maybe Derek said that we're manifesting these bizarre realities by maybe meme magic. They slip it into the zeitgeist and we start believing it, and then it kind of manifests it for them. Who knows? Crazy stuff. You're the best, Tam. You're the best. Let's roll. Anybody else got something else? Test.
I was going to say something. I was wondering too, maybe those monsters back, like that Cyclops, maybe those were tulpas that were manifested by some, collective evil people, that they created these tulpas, or maybe the unicorns were also the magical tulpas that were positive, and the Cyclops might have been the negative. I don't know. Just saying. That's all.
Nice. Thank you. That's all. Thanks, Daryl. James, go ahead, James.
Yeah, just getting back to the the idea of people that are creative, that make either books or movies or anything. Even if you look at people that haven't necessarily seen their creations out in public, if you ask enough writers, and I've seen this online, I saw referred to on a few different sites and studies and things. A lot of people that do these kind of things where they're basically storytelling, they'll say that they can hear the voices of the characters as they're making the story. And even that some characters will kind of consult with the writer as they're making the story, as in, let's say, they will agree or disagree with the writer based on the ideas for the story. Like, I would do that. That makes sense. I would do it this way, or I wouldn't do it. Or even in some cases, they will do things that totally surprise the writer, and I've had that happen. And so there is something to that. It may be like a lesser form or a lower energy form of, people actually seeing their creations. But I think there's something to that as well.
Pretty wild. I love it. So you're saying that there is a chance maybe we can manifest store for Tam Bam. maybe.
There's a lot of chances. There's a lot of chances of manifesting all that stuff. A lot of all the characters. Even if you just look at, if you look at so many of the characters that are in the comics, they're taken from mythology anyway. So they're just extending these characters. They're just keeping them in people's minds, even today.
Yeah, exactly right. Great stuff, James. James always on the ball with this and bringing it to another level as always. Please, James Salcedo Paranormal. Links in the description. Give him a follow. You're the best, bro. You are the best. Let's do it. I'm playing some music, and then I'm going to go sit down and watch some baseball, unless it's over, because it might be. But who knows? Let's do it. Let's smash the button. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for hanging out and spending your time here. Thanks for all the amazing phone calls. It's one of them ones where you're just like, damn, Damn. Call after call after call, like Night Stalker says. It's a murderer's row of callers. And that's what Troubled Minds has become. It absolutely blows your brain up. More merch coming. It is t-shirts, and I got a yoga pants request and some other things. So there is more Troubled Minds merch. If you want hats, troubledfans.com, and more stuff coming. T-shirts and all the rest of that. So it's on the way. And there you go. If you want to support the show, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is, again, you can sub up on Rockfin, on Patreon directly, or you can sub up on Twitch directly. You can do that through Amazon Prime, actually, the Twitch part at no additional cost if you're already paying for Amazon Prime. Second thing is, if you want to help the show, listen to the podcast feed. That's monetized. There's got some commercials in there. And there is now 390 episodes. So lots of good stuff back there. Lots of amazing thoughts from lots of amazing people included in those discussions. So go check out one of those old shows you haven't seen. Maybe put it on while you're cooking or something, and that will help the show as well. It's a way you can help without actually spending money. And of course, spread the word. As always, the algorithms are what they are, but spread the word, and that's the old school word of mouth. We can beat the algorithms that way. So let's get the hell out of here. As it finishes, at the end, this is for Jay in New York. Now, the bad news is we're done. The good news is, God willing, we've got tomorrow. Please, links in the description from all these amazing people that contribute, that do have other channels and other endeavors. Please give them some love, because they are very brilliant, very kind to spend their time with us, very generous with their time to share their knowledge. So I appreciate that a lot. Do spread the love there. And let's get the hell out. As it finishes, it goes exactly like this. Anybody want to take it?
Be sure, be strong, be true.
There we go. Exactly like that. Thank you for listening. From our troubled minds to yours, have a great night.
That was fun.
Great show.
Nice job,
Really
guys.
enjoyed
Thank you. Very nice. We'll be back tomorrow with more crazy stuff. So don't put the maybe juice mugs away just yet.
Okay. This is fun.
All right, music is ending. Yeah, there we go. I'll just end it. Watch this. Boop. Fade it out. There you go. Have a great one, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.